Doesn't it feel later than it is?
Good evening.
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 Lynn.
Hi, everybody. It's Sue.
Hi, Sue.
Hello.
Hi, Sue.
Hello.
We're all here.
Sue, are you going on your trip?
I am.
Wonderful.
I want to check in. Is there or is there not a design review on the 12th, November 12th?
I thought there was. I think the cancellation was Rogerio's invitation and not David's, and that's why it was a little confusing.
Well, I understand that, but then I never got any confirmation either way when I asked people. So I want to know if there's a meeting or not, because I will be away and I'll have to take my computer if I do, so I can be on Zoom. I don't really want to take my computer, but I will if I have to.
The item that was on that agenda on the 12th was moved, so we're not having the meeting on the 12th.
Okay.
Thank you for the confirmation, Jennifer. I appreciate that.
Enjoy your holiday.
One last thing to carry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Evening, everyone.
Good evening. Congratulations.
Hey, John, congratulations.
Thank you.
You. I miss you.
Oh, I don't know. Am I here still on the 16th, Lauren? Let me know.
When are you getting sworn in, John?
I think the meeting's the 7th of December.
Oh, December. Okay. You're still on the commission then.
Yeah, I think so too.
Careful.
David, are you ready? It's 6:30 and I think we're all here.
Yeah, hi, Adam. Yeah, I think we're all here. We are live on cable channels and on the social media platforms, so we're good to go.
Okay, well, if you're ready, then I will call this meeting to order of the West Hollywood Planning Commission for Thursday, November 5th. The first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I've asked Commissioner Altschul to lead the Pledge of Allegiance, but if everyone else could mute their mics so it's not a jumbled mess and we just hear one voice.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. David, could you please call the roll?
Hello?
David, we can't hear you. Oh, there you go.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening. Commissioner Jones?
Here.
Commissioner Hoopengarner?
Here.
Commissioner Carvalero?
Here.
Commissioner Buckner?
Here.
Commissioner Altschul,
Chair,
Vice Chair Erickson,
Here.
and Chair Bass.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you. Item 4 on our agenda is to approve the agenda. I'm going to ask that we move item 10A to after item 11A, because we have several recusals on that item. So it would be better if we get the rest of the work done, and then those commissioners who have to step out of the meeting can do so at that time without having to return if they don't want to. So I'm going to ask that. Are there any other changes to the agenda?
So wait a minute, Adam, you're moving it after 11A.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're all right with that?
Yeah.
I would like to address the item of recusal.
Please.
I live within the radius with respect to, I guess it's item 11A, the sign.
10A. It's 10A, John.
I live within, my building is within 500 feet of item 10A. My particular condo is maybe not, but I don't see the location from my unit. The unit faces, the sign faces Shoreham, or Sherborne primarily, or realistically. I access my buildings from Horn, so I don't see it, I don't drive by it. So I do not believe it has any impact whatsoever on my unit. With respect to the Hancock item, I'm not within the 500-foot radius of that. I may be within 1,000 feet, I'm not sure, but I don't have any conflict with that and don't see any impact on that with respect to my condominium. So I will not recuse myself from either of those items.
Great. So
And
when
I-
we get to the items, I will ask the commissioners who are recusing on different items to state their reason for recusal at that time, so that
But
it's.
I will also add, I've discussed it with the city attorney.
I'm sorry I cut you off. I'm sorry, John.
You're excused.
So with those with that change, moving the one item, are there any other changes or a motion to approve? Commissioner Buckner?
I move approval of the agenda with those changes.
I second.
I'll second.
Thank you. David?
Thank you.
David, do you need to call the roll on that, or?
I'll call the roll. Yes, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Hoopengarner?
Yes.
Commissioner Buckner?
Yes.
Commissioner Altschul?
Yes.
Commissioner Carvalero?
Yes.
Vice Chair Erickson?
Yes.
And Chair Bass.
Yes.
And the agenda is approved as amended.
Thank you. The next item, number 5 on our agenda, approval of the minutes from October 15th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
Back to you, David.
Are we doing a roll call? Is that what we're doing?
David Gillick?
I'm getting my feed here is just really, it's really bad. Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
We'll help you, David. Hold on.
We wave and go.
Okay. The roll call, Commissioner Buckner,
Yes, David.
Commissioner Altschul,
Yes.
Commissioner Carvalero,
Yes.
Vice Chair Erickson,
Yes.
and Chair Bass.
Yes.
And the minutes are approved as presented.
Thank you very much. David, if you at any point need just a moment because
Okay.
of the, please just,
The roll call, Commissioner Buckner,
Yes, David.
Commissioner Elchill,
or
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
a
Commissioner
member of the
Cavallaro?
public that's not muted.
Yes.
Vice Chair Erickson,
there's somebody who's not
and Chair
muted.
Bass,
Yes.
and the minutes are approved as presented.
Thank you very much. David, if you at any point need,
Okay, I think we're caught up. So if there's somebody out there who doesn't have their phone muted, please do that at this time. Unless you're actually speaking, please keep it on mute as much as possible. The next item is public comment. And just before I headed into that, I wanted to ask David, if there is a feed issue that you need to deal with, please let me know, and I'm sure we can take the appropriate time to wait for you to do that, because I know your work is essential for this commission to function. So please just let me know if that's the case. But since we're at public comment, do we have anybody who's asked to speak at this time, David?
Okay. Okay, for public comment, I have nothing for this item.
Okay, thank you. So we will now move on to item number 7, which is our director's report. So Mr. Kehoe.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners, and congratulations to John Erickson on the election on Tuesday. So I have one item that I'd like to address, and that has to do with the zone text amendment that the Planning Commission reviewed a while back that was scheduled for City Council and has been postponed. And the state has taken action that has impacted that one. So I just want to read a little statement. So if people are interested in this particular item, they kind of understand what's taking place. So on March 5th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on a zoning ordinance text amendment to align our ordinance with state law regarding housing issues. At that time, the Planning Commission also recommended approval to change our ordinances to no longer require parking for 100% affordable housing. You may remember this was a fairly controversial item at that time. This item had been scheduled for City Council, but has been postponed to December 7th. Since that Planning Commission meeting in March, the state has passed yet another bill impacting housing developments in the state. We are again going to try to align our zoning ordinance with the state. And so we're bringing this item to the November 19th Planning Commission meeting. Among the new provisions in this bill is the elimination of parking requirements for 100% affordable projects in transit heavy areas like West Hollywood. So essentially the thing that we did as a voluntary measure back in March has now been turned into a state mandate. So it's no longer a voluntary decision on our part. And whether or not we approve these zone text amendments, the state law will take precedent over us. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to combine both the Planning Commission actions, both the one from March and whatever the Planning Commission does at the next meeting, and combine them into one staff report for the City Council. And we have that scheduled for December 7th. Because there was a lot of public concern about that item back in March, we are going to have a public meeting prior to that City Council meeting. So interested residents can find out about the changes in state law and how that impacts the ordinance changes. And that's set for Tuesday, November 24th at 4 p.m. And we'll have more information on that for interested parties.
Vice Chair Erickson, you have a question?
Yeah, just for the public's sake, John, because I know that was a fun meeting that we all had. It was actually when we could be in person, so that was nice. But ultimately, just so the public was clear, a new law that was passed because there was some controversy around this item. I believe it was 6-1. We passed it. Now the city has to adhere to state law, and that's it. So although people are upset about it, this is the state law and we are just updating our code regardless of, I understand neighborhood concerns and those things that we are taking into consideration then, but now we have to make sure our code is in compliance with state law. Otherwise we could be liable.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And that's
In other
all I-
words, so in other words, state law is going to preempt anything that the city was planning to do in any event.
Correct.
And in other words, Sue, the Planning Commission saw the future of this item and voted 6-1 to make sure we did this for 100% affordable housing projects. So it's good to see that these things come into play in the ways in which they do.
Yeah.
And that's all I had for tonight.
Thank you. Any other questions for John at this time? Okay. So our next item will be items from commissioners, and I will just call on you in the order that you are on my screen if you have something. Commissioner Altschul.
Congratulations to John Erickson for his win in an election to the city council. I think it's wonderful to have one of our own group serving on the council, and lots of luck, and enjoy it tremendously.
Commissioner Buckner.
Just that we all should just be calm and wait for the election results. It's looking very positive for Vice President Biden. And let's just hope that things calm down. And that's all I can say. And thank you, Commissioner Erickson, for all your service on our commission. And I wish you good luck as you become our new council member.
Thank you. Commissioner Jones.
Hi, thank you, Chair Bass. So just to echo my colleagues, I feel like we're just going to go around here, but I just want to congratulate Commissioner Erickson, soon to be council member. I guess this makes you council member elect Erickson. I also want to thank just everyone in West Hollywood who voted. I know this is a kind of history-making circumstances under which we all had to figure out a way to cast our vote, whether it was via mail-in ballot or a drop-off box or voting in person. And we had great turnout, and I really love to see it. So as always, everyone's participation in the process and in civic engagement is, the way that good decisions get made. And I'm just grateful to be a part of this community. So that's all.
Well said. Commissioner Cavallero.
Basically going to say what's already been said, but it's been amazing to watch John Erickson's campaign in the middle of this national campaign, and being able to keep the focus and to come out with a win. I think it's just so impressive. I'm going to miss you. I know we're going to miss you. But I'm looking forward to seeing you on council. And yes, I'm nervously waiting for Nevada or Georgia to say something. They were supposed to say something today at 10 a.m. So patience.
And Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Yes, needless to say, I would be curious as to the statistics of alcohol consumption over the past number of days, because it seems to have been rather an epic time. And I imagine that is probably not going to change over the next couple of days. In any case, hoping we can keep a peaceful transition throughout our country and our city. And that said, again, congratulations, Commissioner Erickson. And I'd also like to extend congratulations to Seppi Shine, who also is our new city council member effective December 7th. So it's been quite an epic week in many respects. And one item of business for Jennifer. A number of months ago, we discussed having the planning manager's report on the number and size of projects approved by staff. And I wondered what the status of that was.
I'll try to find out as the meeting goes on, and I'll update you in the planning manager's report.
Thank you.
Great. And I am going to take a little liberty and go out of turn. So we can leave the last word to the vice chair, and just congratulate you. Thank you for your incredible service as a planning commissioner, as I believe it was LGAB before that. And just really appreciate everything you have done. The city of West Hollywood, and excited to see what you do in the future. And I think it's incredibly exciting that we are going to have a female majority on the city council for the first time in our city's history. And I want to acknowledge that and congratulate Councilwoman elect Shine on her victory, and it was resounding. And so I'm incredibly excited to see what the next generation of leadership in the city of West Hollywood brings. And with that, I will give you the last word, Vice Chair Erickson.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just want to thank each and every one of you, my fellow commissioners. You all welcomed me into this commission with such open arms, and each of you has taught me something very, very specific, and how passionate and detail-oriented we have to be for our city. And this commission is truly one of the best in my opinion. And we all work so well, and really making sure that we're putting forward everything. I want to thank Lynn, Adam, Rogerio, Stacy, Sue, John. I mean, just truly your professionalism, your friendship, everything is truly well received. I tried to count the number of tears I've gotten, times I've gotten emotional over the last 48 to 72 hours. That limit does not exist anymore. And so there it is. My mother is still crying. So that is, in Wisconsin, but that's because it went blue. Thank the Lord, baby Jesus above, and all of the wonderful stuff that we have there. But just truly thank you all for all of the service you do to this city, all of the work that we do together. And I'm just, I will miss you all. And I really look forward to working in this new level. Congratulations to Councilwoman-elect Shine, as well as I want to extend all of my sincere thanks to Councilmember Heilman and Councilmember John Duran for their years of service. I started as an intern at the City Council, and I had the opportunity to work with them and know them in that level, and then grow as friends. And so I want to make sure we recognize their long tenure to this city and shaping everything that we do. And I think it's no secret that John Heilman is a personal hero of mine, and someone that I admire greatly. So just want to say thank you to them and all the other candidates that ran, and let's get to work. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So that moves us on to consent calendar, and we have none. And so as we noted at the beginning of the meeting, we have moved item 10A to after 11A. So we will move to item 10B. And at this point in time, I want to call on Commissioner Hoopengarner to state her recusal, and then we will move on to the item.
Yes, I live within 500 feet of this project, so I will be going bye-bye for a while. See you later.
Thank you. We'll see you in a few minutes. I think David is going to put Commissioner Hoopengarner in a waiting room, and I see that has happened. So we will move forward. Before we go into the staff report, David, do we have any public speakers on this item?
I have no recorded speakers for this item. No public speakers.
With that in mind, I would just ask staff, this is an incredibly routine item. So if you could just explain to the public in a few sentences what it is we're doing, I think we could probably move forward pretty quickly with this item.
Sure, no problem. So good evening, Chair and Commissioners. So the item before you is just a subdivision request only. It's pursuant to state law. All subdivision applications just has to be reviewed by the Planning Commission at a public hearing and just make the required findings. So it's with staff assessment that this project for you, which is 1006 Hancock Avenue, will not be detrimental to the public welfare and not impede on the implementation of the general plan and the provisions and nor the purpose and intent of the provision of zoning code. So basically, the staff recommends approval.
Thank you. Perfect report on that. And so does anyone on the commission have questions of staff at this point?
No.
Commissioner Buckner?
I have no question. It's just that, just for the public, it used to be that these items would come to the commission for full hearing. Because of the change in the state law, these subdivision plans come to the council only for certain findings, and the approvals are made at staff level or at director level. So just so people who are watching wonder what's going on, I think that it needs to be a little bit clearer as to why we're just moving fast over this.
Thank you, Commissioner Buckner. Yeah, the project's already been approved. This is, the way I look at it is basically drawing invisible lines between units. And we have to make a finding that's not going to be detrimental to the community. And our staff report is thorough in lining all and identifying all of that. So at this point, I want to make sure we don't run over public comment. And if somebody has not signed up and would like to speak and is on the call right now, please speak up and we would be happy to hear you. Give that just a moment. And hearing no one, is there a motion? I see Commissioner Altschul.
I would move the staff recommendation.
Commissioner Buckner, are you seconding?
I agree, second it.
David, can you call the roll, please?
Thank you. Commissioner Altschul,
Yes.
Commissioner Buckner,
Yes,
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Carvalero,
Yes.
Vice Chair Erickson,
Yep.
Chair Bass,
Yes.
and the motion is approved with 6 ayes and Commissioner Hoopengarner noting as recused.
Thank you. Can you please invite Commissioner Hoopengarner back into the meeting?
Okay, she should be back. Let me text her really quick just to make sure.
There she is. She popped down on the bottom part of my screen.
That must have been an epic deliberation.
It was tough, Commissioner Hoopengarner. Yes. Welcome back. So with that, we will move on to our next item, which is item 10C, zone text amendment regarding alcohol service in R3C and or that's CC and R4BC zones. And do we have a staff report?
We do. Good evening. Thank you very much, Chair Bass, commissioners, and members of the public watching at home. My name is Rachel Diamond. I'm a senior planner in the Long Range Planning Division in Planning and Development Services. And tonight before you, we have a zone text amendment to allow for alcohol service in already permitted restaurants and retail uses in the R4BC and R3CC zone districts. Give me just a moment. Thank you. So the goal for this zone text amendment is to really allow for the small scale neighborhood serving commercial on the ground floor of R3CC and R4BC zone properties to be successful both during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. And so what we realized in looking at this zone district is that we do allow restaurants and retail uses, but we don't allow alcohol service. So this is the only place in the city where you're allowed a commercial use yet aren't allowed to at least ask for alcohol service. So in order to facilitate that, this zone text amendment would expand the land uses in both of those zone districts to allow for on and off-site beer, wine, and liquor service with either a minor conditional use permit or a conditional use permit. So just to give you a little bit of background about the two zone districts that we're talking about, the R3CC and R4BC zone districts were designated as zone districts in the general plan, but weren't immediately rezoned when the general plan was adopted, and were ultimately rezoned to those districts in early 2018. The R4BC zone district is shown on the screen here, and it's the parcel south of Beverly between Weatherly and Clark. And you can see in green just below the CC2 zone district. These properties were rezoned from the R2 district, and they allow for the same residential density as the R4B zone, but then also allow for commercial on the first floor. Most of these parcels, which are 15 in total, for a total of 13 property owners, include multifamily housing. There are a few single family lots as well, one vacant lot and one parking lot as well. And there are, in the R4BC zone districts, there are no existing uses that include liquor. In fact, there are no commercial uses at this time in this location. For the R3CC zone district, this area is on Fairfax on the east side of the street between Willoughby and the alley south of Santa Monica Boulevard. And these properties were also designated in the general plan to be rezoned from CN1 to the R3CC zone district. And similar to R4BC, they allow for the same residential density as the R3C district, but then again, allow for commercial on the first floor in a limited capacity. Just to give you an idea of the uses along Fairfax in this district, there is a parking lot as well as a number of retail and office uses, some services, mostly auto related. And then there's also a new cluster of restaurants that opened just north of Romaine. And while they are interested in alcohol service, this isn't the only catalyst to this conversation. Ultimately, we want to make sure that restaurants and retail have the ability to request alcohol service in order to provide that service to the community and to be a neighborhood serving use and allow for that expanded operation. So just to move on, in the CN1 district, as well as every other commercial district in the city, alcoholic beverage sales for off-site consumption is a conditional use permit. And then alcoholic beverage sales for on-site consumption of beer, wine, and hard liquor are minor conditional use permits. Minor conditional use permits are reviewed by the director in a director's hearing, whereas the standard conditional use permit for off-site sales would be required to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. So as you can see as well, in the R2 district, which is the previous district prior to rezoning of the R4BC district, those uses are prohibited. Okay. And again, all of those uses are prohibited in the existing R3CC and R4BC zone district, and the proposed zone text amendment would allow those. Again, restaurants are permitted at 1,200 square feet or less in those zone districts, and general retail is also permitted with no limitations on the size, although they are all limited to commercial on the ground floor of all of these uses only. There are a number of required findings that would need to be made in order to get approval of a minor conditional use permit or a conditional use permit. And I show these on the screen to show you that there is an individual review for every project that would move forward. So this zone text amendment wouldn't allow alcohol service to occur anywhere. It would allow the request for alcohol service to occur. So you would still go through a full public review and public process in order to get approval of a minor conditional use permit or conditional use permit with a public hearing at either the director's hearing or at the Planning Commission. And either one of those bodies would need to make all of these findings in the affirmative in order to approve each individual project. And so that's where you could really individually tailor any conditions to each project to ensure that you're mitigating any potential impacts to the neighborhood. So, just to touch again upon alcohol service as a zone text amendment, as far as CEQA goes, this zone text amendment is categorically exempt based on the fact that, alcohol service is really an accompaniment to the uses that are already permitted in these locations, such as restaurant and general retail. But at the same time, you would have individual review of CEQA for each MCUP and CUP. Another thing that's come up in the past has been parking as an issue. The R3CC and R4BC zone districts do not require commercial parking at all. And the reason that is because they were smaller lots that have smaller commercial space, particularly only relegated to that first floor. And as a result, weren't required to provide any parking. Additionally, because these are really neighborhood serving uses that most likely people would walk to versus become destinations because of their limitations on size. So again, any of these concerns that I think would happen on an individual basis could be addressed in the MCUP and CUP level. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions and just close by saying that we really want to be able to provide people with the opportunity to have restaurants and retail that have less limitations on operation and allow people the opportunity to ask to provide alcohol service, to provide that service to the city itself. So with that, I'm available for any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I can only, there we go. Commissioner Jones.
Thank you. I'm just curious, when the rezone came to us, I think it was in October of 2017, why wasn't this included then?
It wasn't something that was specifically contemplated. I think at that time we wanted to establish the zone and really didn't think about this particular aspect of restaurant operations. Ultimately, once we started to really see new operations come into play, we realized that there was a clear gap there.
And in terms of the new operations, are you able to list, are you talking about on this particular strip of Fairfax north of Romaine? Because I only know of one and it's a coffee place.
So there's actually a new group of restaurants called Grain Traders, and I believe it's more market style on Fairfax and Romaine. And I believe they would request alcohol, and they also submitted a letter of support of this item. And
right, are they open yet though?
They are open
yet?
They
Okay.
are. And then Tail of the Pup is interested in coming back to the corner lot at Willoughby, and so they, of course, are as well interested in exploring alcohol service for their business. And they don't have approval yet, so that's something that's into the future.
Okay, thanks.
Do any other commissioners have questions at this time? Just questions. Commissioner Hoopen-Garner?
Yes, so to be clear to Commissioner Jones's question, this is in response to specific requests from specific businesses. It's not a city policy change as a result of, as to what Stacy said, this, we already voted on this in terms of, well, we all voted opposed to it, but we all voted no to these amendments, but the restaurants in particular are asking for us to modify our zone text in order for them to apply for alcohol licenses. Is this correct?
No, we recognize that there was a gap in our regulations prior to anyone even specifically talking to us. So staff had this on our radar. Ultimately, once a restaurant did come in, they also brought it up, but we had already been working on it. Otherwise, if it was something that was triggered by a specific business, they would request the zone text amendment themselves typically.
So when this came before us 3 years ago, we requested that each of these different zoning types be addressed separately because they're very separate property types and very separate locations. Is there a reason that these were brought again together, even though they're very separate properties and very separate property types?
Yes, they are very separate properties, but their zoning land uses are identical. And as such, they both have the same gap. That is a lack of alcoholic beverage service for allowable restaurants and retail for existing buildings and buildings in the future. So That's why we ultimately decided to bring both of these together. I understand the want to analyze them separately, and totally understandable, but it's still the same issue of that gap existing for both of them and for potential businesses in those locations.
Except they are two very different properties and very different property types. So the properties on Fairfax across the street are commercial, around the corner commercial, etc. It's a very heavily trafficked street. And the properties on Beverly are tucked in behind existing commercial, and they're right next to existing residential. So I guess my question is, do we have to consider this as 100% all or nothing? Or do we have do we have the leeway to consider these as two separate zone text amendments with different ordinances?
You can provide a recommendation on the two different zones. You could say yes to no, and you recommend no on the other. It would be a pretty simple change to the resolution. So from a land use perspective, you can consider them differently. They're in one resolution, and there's no technical reason we need to separate them out. It's an easy notation whether alcohol would be permitted or not in your recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Buckner?
Thank you, Commissioner Hoopen-Gardner. I'm a little concerned about allowing alcohol use as a matter of a zone change on properties that are so close to residential. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Can you be a little bit more clear, Rachel, on why we're dealing with these as this one group, one thing instead of separate?
Sure. So we certainly can talk about them separately and talk about the two zone districts as two separate items. But ultimately, staff wanted to bring them both together because both of these zone districts have very similar goals in that they allow ground floor commercial and residential above. And so both of these zone districts ultimately, whether they have it today or in the future, allow for small scale neighborhood serving ground floor commercial, like restaurants up to 1,200 square feet and general retail. So they already allow for those commercial uses that you may have some concerns about in terms of being adjacent to residential, but those are things that are permitted uses in those districts. So now we're looking at allowing essentially what is an accessory use to, or an operational aspect of restaurants and retail to allow them to request for alcoholic beverage service, to put them on the same level that every other restaurant and every other general retail in the city are permitted to request. So these are things that every other business of the same nature is allowed to have in the city. And ultimately, we want to have that fairness across all of our land uses. And certainly there may be instances where there are concerns about having those uses. And that's why they're a minor conditional use permit or a conditional use permit, so that we can go through the public process to ensure that each individual request is really addressing those concerns that you do have. And I think when you do that, you can allow it to be a case-by-case basis.
Commissioner Caballero.
Thank you, Chair Bass. And building on Commissioner Jones, Hoopen-Gardner, and Buckner's comments, why are we making this a permanent change? You started the conversation in the presentation, with it's being COVID related. Couldn't we deal with these on a case-by-case basis?
So we certainly can deal with them on a case-by-case basis, but we have to allow for the use to exist on a ground level, right? So the zone district has to allow alcohol for us to allow it now or during COVID. So we can't just start granting licenses for something that's not permitted in a zone district just because of COVID. And emergency, ordinances. So ultimately it needs to be an allowable land use. And then certainly under COVID, you could say things like, per our existing emergency ordinance, that their outdoor area can be further expanded than is currently allowed. And that the alcohol could be expanded to those areas, but you still have to have a license to begin with to be eligible for any of those expanded provisions for COVID.
Okay,
so that's why we can't just give people everything for COVID. It has to still be allowed.
So there still will be a public hearing for both.
Absolutely.
CUP. Okay.
Commissioner Altschul.
And I think that's the important point, that if the zone provides for it, anybody can ask, but it preserves the right for the residents and the neighborhoods to have a public hearing and a public process for the granting of the ask. So what this is doing is allowing people ask for something and letting them do it if it's granted, if the public is noticed and has the right to come and state their objections, if any.
Great. Any other questions at this time? Oh, there you are, Commissioner Hooper. I'm losing you in the leaves. I lose your hand, but go ahead, Commissioner Hooper.
So 2 questions. Just to be clear, our neighbors in Los Angeles were noticed, correct?
That's correct. Anyone within 500 feet of the zone district received a notice regardless of boundary of WeHo or LA.
Okay. So on page 3 of the staff report, you have an image of the R4B-C properties, which is the Beverly section of properties. And from this image, it appears that there's a street in front of those properties. But in fact, there is no street there. If you turn the page and look at the properties, they are actually butt up exactly against residential properties. So my question to you is, where else in the city of West Hollywood do we have a chunk of commercial inserted into a residential block?
So I can pull up the zoning map. There are a number of places where the commercial wraps around similarly to these properties, where it wraps around the corner of a commercial boulevard. And I'll pull that
I'm talking about inserted into the middle of the block.
So not inserted into the middle of the block, but as I stated, similar to this circumstance in R4BC, where it wraps around the corner, such as these, where they are around the corner off of Beverly. So off around the corner off of a commercial boulevard, such as Santa Monica Boulevard.
In
There are
the
a number of
of
locations.
Robertson, I believe. There are places on Robertson that are equal to that.
Where commercial is inserted next to a residential?
Commercial exists next to residential and butts up against it.
Well, it would make sense that most of our city, commercial and residential, are right near each other. That's not the issue.
Right near.
It's a double layer of commercial, I think, is the question. So it's not just the street abutting. The CC2s are on a commercial street. They're facing the street. But this is a second layer of commercial in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And my question is, where else do we have a situation where we have a second layer of commercial inserted in the middle of a block that would mimic this, and we could see similar circumstances with a similar request?
One example, and if you give me a moment, I can share my screen, but it's going very slowly, so I apologize. One example of a location where commercial is expanded off of a commercial boulevard and onto a more, I would say, residentially characterized street at this point. And again, I apologize, my computer is moving very slowly, so I'd love to share, is on Santa Monica Boulevard and Orange Grove, for example, where CC2 expands about a third of the way up the block. So in that location, In commercial core 2, you're allowed to have restaurants, you're allowed to have retail, and similarly, you're allowed to request, not automatically receive, but request a minor conditional use permit or conditional use permit for alcoholic beverage service for commercial uses in those locations. And you would be on, again, what is characterized as a residential street, Orange Grove, next door to a 100% residential building, and allowed to request alcohol service. So
yeah, I'm looking at the map on that, and that is a wraparound. It is not inserted in the middle of the block.
And Rachel, do they have restaurants with alcohol use or liquor stores and stuff like that in those areas? I don't think so.
You'll have to bear with me to cross-reference that and the liquor licensing.
No, because that's actually a daycare center. That's where they want to build the bond.
But again, as an example of where commercial extends further into residential, is it the center of the block? No, because I think if you have an entire block of residentially zoned property and a tiny, blob of commercial, it's probably spot zoning and not something that's the typical pattern of our zoning district development in the city. So, again, I realize that, and I think if you look at page 4 of 7 of the associated staff report, you can see in figure 4 that the properties that are zoned R4BC are basically just off of Beverly Boulevard, just behind the commercial district. So they're not right in the middle of the residentially zoned properties below them. They're adjacent to them. And again, this is a condition that we have throughout the city. So I understand not wanting to allow alcohol service adjacent to residential. And I think that, upon getting any requests for that we would look at ways to either allow it with conditions to make it work or just not allow it at all, because perhaps in specific locations, it's not the right location for this. But ultimately, in places where restaurants and retail are allowed, we really want to give them that opportunity to be able to request it.
Vice Chair Erickson.
Thank you. We're still in the questions part, right?
We're still in the questions, yes.
I'm going to actually withhold my question then until we get to comments. I was on long range subcommittee, so I don't have many other questions at this moment. Yeah, thanks, Chair.
I'm the same way. I don't have additional questions because we did hear this at long range. And so with that, do we have any public speakers, David, on this item?
We do. We have a few.
Okay. Before you go into, one moment, please. I do want to disclose, normally we don't disclose on zone text amendments and all of that, but because this is to specific areas, I do want to disclose that I live within 500 feet of these addresses on Fairfax. But when we heard this item three years ago, we investigated this, and I'm a month-to-month renter. I have no financial conflict here, but I do want people to know that I do live nearby, just so that they can be aware of that in full disclosure. Is anyone else? I don't think anyone else would have a disclosure here, but since I did, seeing no one else, David, could we move into the public speakers then?
Chair?
Yes.
I have a question for legal. Is there any disclosure requirement for any financial relationship with any owners on these properties? Either in public policy, excuse me, donations or other financial relationships?
Well, this is a legislative item, so we don't have the same types of disclosure requirements that we normally do. I'm not sure I understand the question about financial relationships. So if you could provide a little more information, perhaps I could provide a more clear answer.
If people have any relationships in their businesses, their employment, or in their city responsibilities where they have taken funds from owners on these properties?
Having taken funds?
Yes.
Again, I'm not sure that I understand the question, why a property owner would be providing funds to somebody on the commission. I'm sorry, it's really hard to answer a conflict question without more facts.
I
So
think
if
I
you
can
want to
cut
have a
through
side
this.
conversation.
Correct
Okay,
me if I'm
thank
wrong,
you.
Commissioner Hoopengardner. Are you asking because Commissioner Erickson took campaign donations, that should he have to recuse? Is that what you're asking? Because I don't think
my understanding that the owners of many of these properties have made campaign contributions to a number of the candidates, and I believe Mr. Erickson was one of them. And so I'm wondering, is that a conflict of interest or isn't it?
Well, there are some state law provisions about developers giving a certain amount of campaign contributions to appointed officials. However, this is a city-initiated zone text amendment, so they're not applicants who have a pending application before the commission tonight, and that state law has to do with having pending applications or interest. I would have to look at it more clearly with more facts to give more information about that. But I know Commissioner Erickson is aware of the statute. He's been provided information about it. So I don't have any more information beyond.
I'm happy to disclose I eat at Kung Pao Bistro 4 to 5 times a week, most likely. But in terms of this item, I don't know any of these businesses that are half listed. If there's a new business that's being proposed for a site, I would have to know. This is also, to state Lauren, this is not an applicant before us. This is a city initiated process. So I think Commissioner Hoopengardner's point, although I understand it, is out of order, and I think we should move on.
Commissioner Cavallero.
Is Rachel still with us? Rachel, I have another question.
Yep.
Right. Okay, hi. So I'm just curious, just in regards to the permanent change to the zoning, why was this not contemplated when it was set up, when the zoning was originally set up for these areas?
Just that, it really just was not contemplated. I hate to say oversight, but it was not contemplated. And I think ultimately, once we started to really realize the vision of R3CC and R4BC as businesses start to turn over, you recognize when there are these types of mistakes. And frankly, it is a mistake because I think it's the city's intent to allow for alcohol service as a potential with a MCUP and NCUP for restaurants and retail.
So zoning R4BC, for instance, it's categorized under residential, not commercial. In residential, you can't have alcohol. So what we're doing is permanently changing it so that you can have alcohol in this specific zone, R4BC, and each applicant will still go through a public hearing, whether it's director or planning commission.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will now move to public comment. Let's third time's a charm here. David, if you could please start that process and run that process for us.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, I have several people that are in the queue to speak. They're all on telephone. So when I call your name, hit your *6 button, *6 for that. You can unmute yourself so that we can hear you. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak, and then I'll jump in at 30 seconds to let you know that you have 30 seconds left. Our first speaker will be Dan Constant, followed by Babette Dickerson. Dan, are you with us?
Yes, sound check. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you for your service to our city and our residents, and congratulations to new Councilman Erickson. I'm speaking on behalf of my mother, Tova Constant, who owns and resides in the residential 8-unit building that directly abuts to the Fairfax Strip in question between Willoughby and Romaine. And I grew up in that building. I manage the building, and I'm speaking in support of my mother and our tenants to help preserve their quality of life. We feel like this proposal is not reasonable, given that the Fairfax Strip has already been upzoned considerably. There's been an elimination of parking requirements, and adding the sale of alcohol will only exacerbate what is already an acute parking issue in the area. And you spoke about the Beverly properties being adjacent to residential. All of this Fairfax Strip is adjacent to residential, and there's no buffer zone. There's no alleyway. The character of the area is affordable housing. There are many young families raising children. And if you look at all the traffic generated by Pink's on Melrose and La Brea, imagine if Pink's was able to serve hard alcohol, how many people they would have. So given that, I would say that West Hollywood is already extremely well serviced and served by numerous hotels, restaurants, bars, nightclubs, supermarkets, and liquor stores that all offer either on-site consumption of alcohol or sales of alcohol. And I don't see a huge groundswell of community residents going to City Hall demanding that we have more establishments offering alcoholic beverages in what has traditionally been a smaller service-oriented street, unlike the busier entertainment-oriented streets, Santa Monica Boulevard and Sunset Boulevard. So we do not see this as a pressing need in the interest of nearby residents. And I would go back to the founding principles of the City of West Hollywood. When we incorporated outside of the LA County, it was in an effort to support a balanced community that supported all the residents, many of whom were being victimized. I don't see this proposal as being supported by residents or being a use that's demanded by residents. And I don't see the provision of offering hard liquor improving the ambience of the area. We also do not agree that most people will walk to these establishments. I think it's going to put more pressure. If you haven't driven by Willoughby and Fairfax recently, I'd ask you to drive by there any time of the day, and you'd hear all the horns and hear all the traffic and see the near accidents. It just seems like it's incompatible to have a hot dog stand that's going to be like Pink's, but Pink's plus alcohol on Fairfax and Willoughby. It butts up to...
And 3 minutes have expired.
Okay. To conclude, we're in favor of thoughtful development, but we do not see how this proposed zoning text amendment benefits the community. Thank you. And the last comment is, in the event that such uses are allowed, I would definitely want to see a limitation on the hours of use to allow residents a quality of life and the ability to sleep at night. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Our next speaker will be Babette Dickerson. Star 6, Babette, and you have 3 minutes to speak. And she will be followed by Bobby Green.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for your service. And I would like to let you know I've received a notice in the mail because I'm a resident and a property owner within 500 feet of the R4 BC zone. And that is, as everyone has been saying, highly residential, not strictly residential. I'm totally against this proposal because it would make our neighborhood unsafe unnecessarily so. I don't want any expansion of alcohol in the area, nor any off-site liquor stores in the area. That's not what this area is about. And none of us moved here so we could live next to a liquor store. It will bring people hanging around in the street with their alcohol, possibly drinking it in front of the area, in the street, in their car in the area, driving drunk, higher DUIs. We have a high pedestrian area here. There are plenty of people walking around to get here, but we don't want them run down by cars who are filled with drunk drivers. That's not necessary. That's basically all I have to say. For me, it's very cut and dry. Once you open the door to having alcohol potentially be in your area, people are going to walk through and ask you to serve alcohol in that area. And that's not what we want in our nice neighborhood here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker will be Bobby Green. Bobby, star 6. You have 3 minutes to speak, and you'll be followed. Victor Olmacek will be followed next after Bobby.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the commission. I am Bobby Green from the 1933 group, business owner in West Hollywood. You may be familiar with some of my other locations on Santa Monica Boulevard, the Harlow, and recently the Formosa Cafe, which we did a restoration of. If you're familiar with our group, our passion is to preserve and save icons of Los Angeles. Growing up in LA my whole life, we are very passionate about that. Our next project coming up is the Tail of the Pup, which was the famous hot dog stand from La Cienega and Beverly since 1946 and sadly disappeared in the mid-2000s. But we were able to source the original building, original sign and everything, and so we are going to bring that back hopefully next year. We've identified a great location that we feel on Fairfax and Romaine. We also feel that adding a beer wine component to this would be very important for the business moving forward. And so we are in support of the zone text amendment. Obviously, Fairfax is a major street. You know, either side, especially south of us on Fairfax, is a major street. Santa Monica, Melrose are major streets. La Brea is a major street. So we would just like to compete fairly on a major street as other major streets in the city do. We do feel that this lack of allowance was a mistake by the city during some zone changing, and we are in support of changing it to support everyone. I know there's several interested developments coming along there, and as well as across the street. We would like to be able to compete with neighbors directly across the street, which would be nice. So we're in support, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
I think David said Victor Omlachenko is next.
I'm sorry. Victor Omachenko is next to speak. Victor, if you want to unmute your call, star 6. You have 3 minutes. For the other callers in the queue on the phone, if you would like to speak, please hit star 9. That'll give me a raise hand signal, and that will give me the cue to let you know that you're good to go. Go ahead, Victor. Victor, can you hit your star 6 and you can begin? Okay, Victor, we can't hear you at all. You may want to hang up and dial back in. In the meantime, if there's anybody else on the call now that would like to speak, just let me know. Just jump in. If not, Victor would have been our last call, our last speaker.
Hi, everyone. This is Ben Nyberg. Can you all hear me?
Yes, Ben.
Okay, great to meet you
Hi,
all.
Ben.
This is my first. This is my first call. I really appreciate you all taking your time and the attention and the care that you're all giving to the neighborhood. I am a new resident here in West Hollywood. I own 2 single-family houses in WeHo. I love it here. I can't imagine myself living anywhere else, and so I'm very happy to see such a concerned group of people on the phone and voicing their opinions. And congratulations to John and everybody else with hopefully a favorable election outcome in short order. So my concern is this: I bought the house right next door to Fairfax, the Fairfax development. There used to be a nursery there. It was a beautiful nursery. I thought it was very, very cool. It was. I think it represented WeHo, and a lot of people knew who the owner was there, and you'd walk in there and talk to the guy, and he was really, really down to earth, very nice guy. I was very upset to see the nursery go and for a new development to come in. I think that there is enough surplus in the market today where people are trying to get out of their leases, they're trying to get out of retail, they're trying to get out of bars and hotels and all these commercial asset classes where we don't need new developments going up with new liquor licenses being approved or even rezoned. So my worst nightmare is to have a liquor license approved or have it upzoned to where, I can't sleep at night because I have drunk people outside my window. I think that the neighborhood is already struggling with, unfortunately, homeless people, drug users, a lot of transient type folks. And the last thing we need to do is compound the issue. And so I could tell you that I am completely against this. All of the neighbors that I've spoken to, both on the LA side, south of me, and east of me, are against this as well. There's a family that lives right next door to me, and a couple other families to the north of us and to the east of us. And the last thing we need is more alcohol and kind of like less parking, more headaches. We have enough problems that we can deal with. I think there's enough surplus in the market where folks want to get out of their leases, retail owners want to get out, the landlord's having a hard time already making their mortgages. I think, if there's a group that wants to go in there and take advantage of a nice retail space, I think there's enough inventory in the market to do that. So I am against this, and I would really appreciate if we could kind of put this on the back burner for now and not approve this measure. That's all I have to say, and thanks so much, and I appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. Victor Olmateker, did you want to try it again? Are you with us still? I'm not showing him in the queue. It doesn't look like. I have one more public speaker that'd like to speak. Sheldon Donig. You can star 6 and make. You have 3 minutes to make your comment. Sheldon, are you there?
I heard the dial tone. Does that tell us, Sheldon, can you hear us?
Sheldon? Okay. I have another person, your phone number ending in 3078. You can go ahead and introduce yourself and speak. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, good evening, everybody. This is Sonny speaking. I'm actually a tenant on Fairfax at Grain Traders. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the commissioners, the chair and the vice chair for their service, and everybody else for their time. We provided a letter of support in regards to this request, but we did not request it. I just wanted to say that for those of you who have seen us at 1010 North Fairfax, I think we've done a great job and we are a great addition to the neighborhood. We've invested an immense amount of money to gentrify the old auto body shop that it was. Prior to us taking over the space, there was a large homeless community living in the space and occupying it. And last but not least, I think we just want to be treated fairly like all of our neighbors in West Hollywood, including our neighbors across the street who do have the ability to serve alcohol. I thank you all for your time and consideration.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, Commissioner.
Could the speaker please state his full name? The last speaker.
Sorry, yes, sir. Yes, sir. My name is Sonny Gill, and I'm on behalf of Grain Traders at 1010 North Fairfax.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Victor Omerchenko that is called back in. Victor, are you with us? Go
yes,
ahead. You have
can
3
you
minutes.
hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Victor Omelchenko. I'm a longtime resident of the city of West Hollywood. I actually live in the area where this new text amendment is being proposed. I live on Laurel Avenue. And what I'd like to say at this point is no, 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 no. Please, as our planning commissioners, do not recommend to the city council approval of this zone text amendment. There are enough liquor licenses throughout the city. This area abuts and is very close to residential areas on, I know, Orange Grove Street, Willoughby, Romaine, as well as going to the west side of the city, Almont Street, Clark Street, and other streets in that area. I think this is being done hastily. I know that procedures were followed, but the fact that only 5 neighbors appeared on I guess a telephonic meeting, and now you're hearing from other neighbors. I think you heard from Mr. Constant saying that there was no groundswell of support for this kind of new amendment. I would consider that you at the city, if this is recommended to the city council, there may be a big groundswell of residents coming to meetings, talking to you. Why are these kinds of things being really done under the subterfuge of COVID? I'm getting a little hot here. But this whole R3C-C, R4B-C, what a gift to the developers. I was at the general plan meeting when we did the last general plan, and nobody was begging for these kinds of zones in our already overly developed neighborhood. No to this draft resolution. Vote no. We don't need any more of these types of businesses in an area that's so close to residential areas. And yes, Mr. Green and his group have done a wonderful job with the Formosa Cafe. And yes, they have a liquor license there. And yes, they've saved historic resource. But there are not that many residential properties around there that I can think of, unless, well, we talk about maybe some currently big buildings that have turned into Airbnbs. So you're hearing from me as a longtime resident, no, no, no. This seems shady and it's too early to approve this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Victor. Chair, we have a couple more that have called in here. The caller with your phone number ending in 2249. You can go ahead, *6, and state your name and city of residence, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Sheldon Donig. I have a property at 1022 North Fairfax. I'm kind of in the center of the block there next to Grain Traders, and I'll be up the street from Trail of the Pup. I don't know enough about way into the past, but if you excluded this 3 years ago, it was because there were no restaurants in the area. There was Tito's Garage. There was a fellow next door to me, had lived there for 50 years, and a couple small businesses, clothing store and the coffee shop. But anyway, I think that Grain Traders isn't going to attract a rowdy crowd, nor is Tail of the Pup. And if you're if you're giving licenses on an individual basis, I don't see a problem. I think we need to ensure the success of these businesses without disturbing the neighbors. So maybe don't allow hard liquor. Beer and wine is great. Catty corner to where the Tail of the Pup will be is another restaurant. I forgot the name of it. It's kind of high end, and they serve beer and wine, and they don't disturb the neighborhood. So I think based on the changes to the area, that is, you've got a really nice restaurant, Grain Traders, and you've got Tail of the Pup. It's not going to attract a rowdy crowd. Maybe further down the block, there's something that people won't like, and you'll be able to control that on an individual basis. But you've got two very nice places on Fairfax, and like I say, I live right next door to Grain Traders. I embrace their being there. Okay, I think it's an asset to the neighborhood. It's a quality kind of a restaurant. It's run by people with a lot of control and a lot of ability. So neither of these places are the kind of places that are going to attract rowdy people or a party situation or something like that. So I'm in favor of the change. And like I say, I understand why you didn't present, the change didn't go through 3 years ago, because you had Tito's Garage and you had, my place was originally a muffler shop and a radiator repair shop. And next door to that was Bill, who lived there for over 50 years. But the neighborhood has changed. It's changed for the better. There's a big apartment complex with retail below going in across the street from me also. So I don't think it'll be a detriment. So when neighbors talk about disturbing their homes in a residential section, we're talking about Fairfax. And Fairfax, from Santa Monica down maybe down to Melrose, has been left behind. And finally, it's kind of picking up with the rest of the city and gentrifying a little bit. But it's gentrifying in a way that it's not a negative, not having a negative impact to the residents in the area. And like I say, I've been there 20 years. I welcome them. I'm 74 years old and I don't drink. So, I have no vested interest. And the people running the restaurant, so I've met them. They're not my friends, but like I say, I embrace having these businesses next door to me, and I wish them success. And to succeed, beer and wine might be a good thing. And thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, I'm listening.
Thank you, sir. And we have one more. This may be a duplicate. Your last four digits of the phone number is 3078. If you'd like to come on, you have 3 minutes to speak. Please announce your name and city of residence.
Apologies, that's a duplicate.
Yes, okay, great. Okay, that was our last speaker, Chair.
Great. Okay. That's the end of the public speakers. And I saw Commissioner Jones had her hand up, and then we'll go to Commissioner Altschul after that.
I have a question of Rachel.
David, can you mute all of the callers?
Thank you, Commissioner Uppengarner.
Confirmed.
So Commissioner Altschul has a question for Rachel, and then we'll go to Commissioner Jones after that. Does that work?
Yes. Rachel. I don't see her.
She's here.
Rachel, the restaurants that are on Fairfax, on that street already, are they all 1,200 square feet or less?
Yes, I believe there are multiple restaurants that are comprised of grain traders that are each 1,200 square feet or less.
And that Grain Traders, is that 1,200 square feet or less?
Let me look for their exact square footage. While the other comments are happening, I'll get right back to you, Commissioner Altschul.
Well, I'll follow up. Do we know the size or the proposed size of the Tail of the Pup?
I do know Tail of the Pup will be less than 1,200 square feet of interior space, as well as the actual, the hot dog wagon outside.
Do we know if they'll have on-site parking?
I can find that out for you as well and get right back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Jones.
Thank you, Chair Bass. I have a lot to say about this item, and I want to make sure that everyone who's on the call, including people who may not have been on commission or at the meeting when we chatted this through and deliberated on this item in 2017, are briefed. So I came out pretty strongly against this at long range, and I want to explain the reasons why I continue to feel very strongly that we should not be approving alcohol use or permitting in these two districts. This doesn't have anything to do, just for the record, with my opinion of, whether or not people should be able to have beer or wine with their dinners. I think my record reflects that I am fully in support of that. I think this is really, to me, that's not asking the right question. This is really about the way that we make policy in the city and the kinds of things that we are willing to allow in applying our process, and the way that we make policy evenly and in a way that is fair to all relevant parties. I also want to say, incredibly helpful to hear from everyone who called in today. I said this at the beginning of the meeting, but thank you very, very much for your comments. I think one of the things that I'm most concerned about is that, the city council 3-2 approved the change in zone for these two particular zones to make it more residentially focused, so that we could build bigger apartment buildings here. So I'm also really not comfortable making a decision for people who are, not yet living in unbuilt units about alcohol use. There's definitely a quality of life issue. So I went back through the original staff report. So just so everyone knows, we originally asked staff to split this up into two different ZTAs because the zones themselves were different and had different needs. I also rewatched the meeting, and the focus of the conversation, and again, it was a unanimous vote, 7-0. And again, I know some people weren't here for that. The focus of that, we actually voted to not recommend, staff's recommendation to change the zone for R3C-C, which is the Fairfax district specifically, centered on a conversation around live work. And the fact that this is one of the only zones in the city where we would be able to do that in any real way, and that we really wanted to get it right. Council voted the way that they did, and it is what it is. I do think it stands noting that 9 of 12 people who voted on this did vote against it, 7 planning commissioners and 2 people on council. So I think it is worth noting. I also want to note that, as it has been explained to me, and Mr. Omolchenko's comments today, I didn't speak with him before the meeting, align with this, that the R3C-C and R3, whatever the other zone is on Beverly, sorry, it's a conflation of numbers and letters, that those were inserted kind of at the 11th hour, and it was not a resident's request. So I'm not a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist, but I do want to just state for the record that there seems to have been an interest in this from a party that was not a resident. I also am a little bit confused about kind of the way that this came to pass. So we've always allowed, residential in the ability to have residential within a commercial zone. I'm not sure why the request wasn't for mixed use, which would prevent us having to kind of make this decision right now. This was originally a commercial zone, and staff recommended and council approved turning it into a residential zone. I recognize that there's a -C attached to the end of it, but the part of the zoning ordinance that we find this in is in the residential portion of the ZO. So to me, by allowing alcohol, it's now formalizing full commercial activity in a residential zone that has never existed before in the city. And I just think like working back through how all of this has worked, the fact that, you know, we didn't consider alcohol when this first came to us, nor did council. Thinking about the way that this has come to pass, you know, again, staff wanted to make it more residentially focused. So that, to me, that doesn't mean bringing in more commercial operations, including the sale of alcohol. Again, this has nothing to do with me not thinking people should be able to enjoy beer and wine with their meal. But to me, there's no reason to think that we ever would have approved this if it had been asked for to begin with. And again, in my humble estimation, the change from CN1 to R3C-C was essentially spot zoning so that one or more developers could get a special accommodation. And we have a process for that. And I think that people should have to go through that. Again, we also wanted to go through this with, you know, successful live work operations. And that was the goal. And we did not accomplish that. So we're thinking about a zone now that's going to be built up that's been approved, it's done, the increase of residential living along Fairfax. And now we want to introduce what's essentially a bar into that. As much as I would love to see Tale of the Pup, that's going to be a destination. And especially if there's alcohol, I just don't see a world, especially where there's no parking, where people from the neighborhood are going to visit that. I think, in my view, the old CN1 would have been better for this because we wouldn't be facing the conflicts with people being noisy at night, et cetera. Like this use always would have been permitted. I just think about these big buildings with zero parking because of live work would have been great, but now it's going to be a residential zone with no parking and with restaurants that have bars. You know, I think about I go and walk down to that area frequently. I'm a frequent visitor at Commissary. Another note on kind of what's across the street in a moment. Commissary is not West Hollywood, it's LA. There's Aesop across the street. There's Blue Bottle. There is Nail Place. You know, there are plenty of neighborhood serving businesses that do not serve alcohol. I also want to be careful in the way that we're comparing to what's across the street because one, what's across the street is not all West Hollywood. And two, it's not an apples to apples comparison. I know it probably seems that way, but it's not the same zone. And we're not talking about the same kinds of properties abutting these residential zones. I just don't think we should make this by right. This allows by right alcohol in what is at its core a residential zone. That's why we changed it, was to make it more residential facing. And I am pretty vehemently opposed to us moving this forward for all of the reasons that I've stated. Again, the way it's written now, you know, they're not required to build residential, and now we're creating a whole like bar district in essence, and that's not what was envisioned. I think we can't talk about land use policy and the way that we're making it without making it clear about what we want that to be. And if we want to have a nightlife district, this is not the place to do that. We voted that it was a bad idea. And now we're saying like, this is the zone and alcohol shouldn't be served here. I think there's also land use conflicts in terms of commercial and residential interface, which some of the people who called in today have taken the time to speak about. I mean, you think about what we have here in terms of conflicts, and like the biggest complaints that we get from, you know, residents are alcohol and rooftop dining. Those are the two biggest, you know, kind of sources of anguish and complaint, and people being really upset because their lives are being disturbed in our neighborhoods. There's a number of examples. I'm not going to service any of them by name, but I think alcohol is changing the relationships and the uses here in a way that we don't want. And it opens the door that we just don't want to open. So to me, the goals for this parcel were amended per this last minute change in the general plan to be residential facing and residentially focused with neighborhood serving commercial. And if these are the steps we took to get to serving alcohol, I just think that's not good policy and we really need to rethink it. So I think those are all of my comments for now. Again, I know that was a little lengthy and I appreciate my fellow commissioners taking the time to hear my comments, but you know, this was something that was that we discussed at length the first time it came before us. Again, I recognize and accept the decision that council made, but I just think it's bad policy. And on that alone, I am not intending to support this item.
Thank you, Commissioner Jones. Commissioner Buckner, I saw you take yourself off mute.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Commissioner Jones for the background and historical context of what happened. I think it's helpful not only for our commission, but for the public on this item. And I am in complete agreement with her perspective. Thank you.
Commissioner Altschul?
And along with what Commissioner Jones said, there was nobody that is occupying any of those commercial spaces today that either purchased or rented that space with the expectation or the ability at the time they went into the situation with the expectation of having alcohol or beer or wine. So I don't believe that if this is not granted, there would be anybody prejudiced who was already there. And I agree with what Commissioner Jones had to say.
And Commissioner Hoopengarner?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Jones, for that excellent background in history. I remember it very well. You and I spoke about it subsequently. It was especially concerning to, I think, all of us, that when in fact the staff report went to City Council, Planning Commission's recommendation of a 7-0 vote to not do this was basically buried on page 6 in one sentence. And that was very concerning to me personally, that our body, one of our major functions is to make recommendations to City Council. That is our mission, amongst other things. And to have that recommendation ignored was very problematic for me. And I have also got a very real problem with setting the precedent of allowing alcohol on a residentially zoned property. And I think that is a very slippery slope for us from a zone text amendment standpoint. I could conceivably be convinced that the Fairfax properties could have a possible rationale. I cannot be convinced that the Beverly properties have a rationale for this type of licensing. As we always say, this license is by right with the property. It stays with the property. So should even a single, and I agree with Tacey, would love to see the tail of the pup come back to the hood. It would be fantastic. Should they have a liquor license when they do? Golly, that would probably be really great. Should it be in this location? I don't think so. Because one of the things about this property is about the parking. There is a real problem with the parking, and that location, I can see a tremendous traffic issue. So with that said, I just don't feel that this should move forward at all, frankly. I agree 100% with Commissioner Jones and Commissioner Buckner. I'm not sure what the solution is, but I don't see it that this is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Caballero.
Yeah, I think all the comments have been made. You could probably tell from my earlier questioning that I was very uncomfortable with this whole thing and how it's been presented. I just don't think it's a good move. So my intent is to vote against it also for all the reasons that have already been said in a very articulate way.
Vice Chair Erickson.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank all the members of the public that called in to speak, especially dealing with the technical difficulties is always fun, especially when it's an item that is super important like this. I also want to commend Commissioner Hoopengartner on a great use of the word golly. Always great to have that thrown into a sentence when we're talking about something like this. I am slightly conflicted on this item. In one retrospect, this is a very urban city. there are many buildings. There are many people that like to live amongst those buildings, and the ways in which we can go to a bar, we live right across the street, we live up the street. I was looking at some of these lists, and you list 7-Eleven. I live in between 2 blocks of a 7-Eleven to the south and a 7-Eleven to the north in Los Angeles, of course, to point on what Commissioner Jones was saying, and understanding that, you know, we live within these districts and what we do. And there are reasons why people move into these cities, especially these neighborhoods, to, I think, live amongst a very vibrant mixed use commercial space, but also mixed use in the terms of where they live and where they play. You know, when we think about the Formosa Cafe that was redone and is very, very amazing, by the way, you know, there are a lot of residences to the north that live right up there. I live over on the east side, as well as the other businesses. So I would have liked to have heard a few more reasonings. I was on long range, and I got the amazing, I did not get Stacy's history lesson then. She brought it back for the commission meeting. So I appreciate it, because I was not on commission at that time. So I appreciate the context. I want to be in full respect of the neighborhoods and the ways in which I understand how they themselves are conflicted on this. Parking concerns are always something that we all have to deal with, no matter where we are. But our city is growing. I think it's just a nature and the fact of our businesses, especially with COVID and how businesses are going to get back liquor licenses, and how we look at how we're supporting our business community is critical. I too share similar concerns that people have talked about. I personally, I think this item, although it is a recommendation to council, there's not an applicant. This is legislative, so it's merely a recommendation. And I'm kind of probably putting myself to repeat myself, maybe at a future date when I am on council. I think this item actually needs to go back to staff. I think I would like to see a little bit more of an understanding of better neighborhood outreach. I would love to see the business community chime in here a little bit more. I think there's a lot of questions that my fellow commissioners who have been on this item a little bit longer might, I think it needs to be cooked a little bit more in terms of the businesses, because I want to respect and do all I can to make sure we're helping businesses, because I want to live in an area like this that's vibrant and mixed use and how we do it. But I understand it's a delicate dance that we have to play. I don't know if my fellow commissioners would support that, or if it's a complete outright rejection of this item. Otherwise, council will, of course, have its say. But I think that this item, like we all can, because we want to get it right and we want to do it right, could go back to the staff for them to do a little bit more cooking. I don't know why I'm using baking references. I'm sorry. And how we can continue to do that to make sure it's done. I am inclined to support it right now as it is, but I want to be respectful of everyone that called in. I want to make sure that we're doing what's best for the long term. The buy right issue is something that I think we take really seriously as a commission. And John, I won't try to quote Jean, because I always get the quote wrong. So I won't, but if you would like to interrupt me and invoke Jean, please do. But thank you. Thank you. But, you know, so that's where I am currently right now. I was generally inclined to support it at long range. Although I am inclined to support it now, I would be supportive of it going back to staff to really, I think, do a little bit more work on neighborhoods and business outreach. I'm surprised, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't see anything in here from the Chamber of Commerce for how this would impact local businesses, especially as we're trying to help them during the COVID-19 pandemic, and what we're trying to do all that we can to encourage new businesses, especially along Fairfax, where we're seeing a vibrant and robust area come in, and then along Beverly. So those are my general comments for right now, Chair, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And baking references are always welcome during COVID, I think. So they're welcome for me, at least. So I was, obviously, we were unanimous 3 years ago, and I was of the same mindset as my colleagues at that point in time. But I'm also very cognizant of the fact that we are appointed to give opinions on these issues, but the council are the representatives of the people, and they made the decision to override our recommendation, or to take our recommendation under advisement and go a different direction. And I respect when council makes a decision different than what I think is right sitting in this seat, that's their prerogative as a council. And so, though I don't think that this was the right zone for this district, I respect that council did that. So then when I approach this issue, I come at it from the perspective that the council's made the decision this is the right zone. So should that zone include alcohol or not? And that's basically the question for me. And, you know, I really identify with the callers today, and I will echo what my colleagues have said and how grateful I am that so many people called in and joined us in this discussion, because I identify because like I said, I live in this area. So at long range, one of the things I brought up is that there is a vast difference between a liquor store and a small restaurant where you can have beer and wine with your dinner. And I think that there's a vast difference between those two types of liquor use. And at least there is for me. And so a liquor store or 7-Eleven, not to name brands, or I'll say a convenience store to be more appropriate there and not call them out. But my concern is having the right type of use for this neighborhood. And when I say this neighborhood, I mean both the Fairfax and the Beverly locations. And I could support a liquor license that was for restaurants specifically. And so I was thinking walking into this meeting that might just simply be, you know, restaurants and that sort of thing. But then when somebody, one of my colleagues said something about a nightlife district, I thought, you know, they couldn't have a bar there. So I looked up Foo Bar, and the size of Foo Bar, which is just down the street, is not much bigger than what would be allowed in this area. Their square footage. And so it is possible, I suppose, and maybe staff can correct me if that's not right, but that's certainly not what we would want. And I know there would need to be a public process. And Sheldon mentioned that, you know, the businesses that are there now would possibly be good recipients of this. And so I recognize the public process would be, it's just not like anyone could come in and get it. They would have to have a hearing. But I see Rachel popped up. Are you correcting me about the nightlife stuff?
Well, I did want to say that you are correct in that you cannot have a bar or nightclub in either of these locations. So that wouldn't be something you could have here.
Good.
Just
That's good
restaurants,
to know.
1,200 square feet or less.
Yeah. So where I come down on this is that I hear what my colleagues are saying, and you know, if I were in a position to have made the final decision, I voted with most of the rest of you 3 years ago that this wouldn't have been the right zone. But recognizing council made a different decision, making these zones better. I think that alcohol consumption, like a bar, no, excuse me, getting hung up on the last thing we talked about, like a restaurant would be appropriate for this zone. But I don't believe a liquor store is appropriate for this zone. Or a convenience store. So that's where I could go with this, but I see lots of hands shut up. So I saw Commissioner Altschul first, and then Commissioner Buckner and Commissioner Jones.
Well, I think if we're going to consider any of it at this point, I would be willing to recommend beer and wine and not full alcohol. And along with that, I would recommend also that those restaurants that wish to serve beer and wine should be parked according to their use in the code.
Commissioner Buckner?
I'm feeling the same thing. A liquor license. This is talking about a liquor license, which includes hard liquor alcohol, which would mean that there would be liquor stores as well. I understand having a neighborhood eatery of some sort, and where there could be beer and wine to drink with, but once you open it up, then you start with the precedent of giving more and more. One person will come, or one business will come before commission or the department and ask for permission to serve beer and alcohol, a beer and wine, and then somebody else will say, well, you gave it to them, why not me? And they're, you know, whatever. I just think it's not a good precedent, is my feeling.
To that point.
And along Fairfax is one thing, but along Beverly, it doesn't feel the same to me. So that's my position.
So Commissioner Buckner, and I'm going to go to Commissioner Jones. In attachment A, which is page 4 of our resolution, there's a table and it lists 3 different types of land use, alcohol permits,
right,
licenses, whatever it might be. Perhaps we could eliminate the one for offsite and the one for hard liquor and just leave the beer and wine as the only one. That's what I was going to recommend, and I think it goes to your point. And I'm interested in your perspective. And while you look for that, I'll call on Commissioner Jones.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. Even with the changes, I'm not in a place where I can support this, and I hope that I have some fellow commissioners who will agree. I would argue, in terms of council's decision, that they weren't considering alcohol at all when they made the vote to change this zone, and that based on that, we need to be making a consideration about this new request as pertains to the zone as it is, which again is mostly going to be a residential zone that has commercial neighborhood serving commercial on the ground floor. Again, I think there are lots of ways that you can serve food and coffee and have an art gallery or a dry cleaners or a nail place or whatever you might want to have without serving alcohol. And I, again, really don't feel comfortable making the call, especially for all of these apartments that aren't yet built, that are live work, moreover, in theory, that aren't even built yet. Like, these people who are going to be living in these units won't even have a say about what's happening. I just think, again, I respectfully disagree. I just don't think that this is the way to make policy. I think it sets an incredibly dangerous precedent for the way that we are doing zoning in the city. And again, this is a residential zone. That's the part of the code that you find it in, regardless of like whether it can be a bar or a whatever. I think about places near me like Laurel Hardware, which is a restaurant that serves alcohol and gets rowdy. There's a number of other examples that I could cite. I don't think it's a road I want to go down. And I can make a motion if everyone is done speaking, but I don't think that they are. So
I'll come back to you for a motion, Commissioner Cavallaro.
Yeah, again, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable with the blanket change, to all of this. I think of neighborhoods as neighborhoods in New York, as you walk down residential areas and you find the little hidden gem restaurant, and how cool that would be in some of these areas that we're considering. But we have the mechanism to consider those on a case-by-case basis, correct? So why do we need to make a blanket change? I'm all for, businesses succeeding and wine and beer while you're having dinner. I really support that. But the idea of making a blanket change is what I'm having a difficult time with. And if the quality of neighborhood that the speakers have referred to is keeping the residential and commercial, so not near us, but there is something in between, like that little neighborhood restaurant that can serve wine and beer and is the little gem in that area. I think I want to support that. I want to support the small gallery that might need to serve alcohol and sell alcohol to stay afloat during COVID or just in general. But I really feel like it needs to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. I'm uncomfortable with the blanket change that kind of opens it all up and could create something that we don't want.
Chair. Sorry,
Just
Sue.
a moment, Commissioner Hoopengartner, I was going to go to her
Sorry
next and
about that.
I'll work my way back around.
Commissioner Jones, as our historian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to recall that the Beverly properties were very specifically described as being design related, being little galleries, little spaces, and that it wasn't even barely discussed the concept of putting even a restaurant in that space, much less alcohol. And that when we reviewed it, that was the discussion. So this whole movement to all of a sudden be restaurants with alcohol in the middle of a residential neighborhood, back to my earlier statement, I could maybe wrap my head around, to Commissioner Caballero's point, small restaurants, local serving on Fairfax, a very commercial area, that I could maybe wrap my head around. But combining it with the Beverly property and that use is absolutely a categorical no for me, because that was never the intent as we reviewed it. And I think as council reviewed it as well.
Vice Chair Erickson and then Commissioner Buckner, I saw your hand after that.
I think Commissioner Buckner was before me, Chair. I'll defer.
Either one, because we're in this Zoom setting, it's so much more difficult to let people talk at the different times. So I hate to be hard-handed with it, but whichever one of you wants to go first and then the other one.
Commissioner Buckner, please.
Commissioner Buckner, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I was going to let our new projected Mr. Erickson go first, but I just feel very strongly about it. And I agree. I do remember our discussion about this. These little properties, we were talking about it being a work business space. And I don't think we ever intended that it be a place where we'd be serving alcohol, and especially along Beverly. So I still feel the way that I did. I mean, I understand that council has a right to make those decisions, that we're just a recommending body. And if they want to overrule our decision or our recommendation, that's certainly their prerogative. But I feel very strongly that we made the right decision in the first place. So that's where I'm at.
Vice Chair?
Yes, thank you. I am trying to ascertain, to find a way to find middle ground here for us to see where, if people are comfortable with this. I hear Commissioner Hoopengardner talk about Fairfax and not Beverly. Please correct me if I got that wrong. I don't want to misquote you. I hear Commissioner Alshall talk about beer and wine. I myself could get behind that. I think that is also something that Chair Bass was talking about. I think that there is a use here. I understand that we are looking at it in the ways through a historical lens, but currently, and I just have to say that as a young 35-year-old who lives amongst these areas and goes to these places, and they're in their neighborhood and they're vibrant businesses, and I don't know, I'm inclined to support the item. This is the type of city I want to live in. This is the type of city I think many of our city who's under the age of 40, 50%, live in their apartments and wherever they live. They like to be able to walk down the street to go to Formosa Cafe or for a new cool bar to come in. I understand neighborhood concerns though, because we want to make sure, because yes, they may love it, but then it gets really rowdy. I understand Commissioner Jones's point about Laura Hardware, although I know where Commissioner Jones lives, so I don't know how loud they're getting, because that's pretty far down the hill. But I want to understand the ways in which I would hope we could come to consensus on this, but I don't think the votes are there for a consensus. But I'll stop because I think Commissioner Jones has a motion.
But before Commissioner Jones, I want to take a second shot at this and say, Commissioner Jones is going to make a motion in a moment. What I would propose would be that we recommend to council not to allow alcohol sales in Beverly, and that we recommend to council that only on-site beer and wine be allowed on Fairfax. That would eliminate most of the concerns, I believe, on Fairfax, but that's where I would head with this. But I am going to defer to Commissioner Jones to make a motion, and we'll see how that goes and where the commission kind of stands at that point.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't get behind that. I think Fairfax needs to be treated. I mean, they are different, different areas of the city, but I think Fairfax, especially given the parking with these new buildings, is just contentious. I'd like to make a motion that we not move forward with staff's recommendation, and that be our, and that is our recommendation. I would also ask respectfully, if this does move forward, that staff gives us a heads up if they decide to make this an alternate recommendation from what is presented at council.
Thank you. Is there a second before we go to the city attorney? Commissioner Hoopengardner, second. City attorney had a comment on this?
Sure. So the way that we could accomplish this is exactly, Chair Bass, where you were on the resolution right before the attachment A, the last section, section 6, we could revise that language tonight to say something like, based on the foregoing and deliberation at the public hearing, the Planning Commission of the City of West Hollywood hereby recommends denial to the City Council of the Zone Text Amendment 2020-04, attached here too, by finding that alcohol use is not compatible in the residential zone. Something like that.
Chair? Hi.
Yes.
I would suggest, we've definitely heard a lot of concerns from the commissioners on this. So I would suggest that staff would just pull this item and do a little bit more thought process on this and return to the commission at a future meeting with the revised ordinance that might address some of the issues. They may not address all of them, but try to address as many of them as we can, maybe narrow the focus of it. I know that might not address all of them, but that's what I would suggest.
So
But return to the commission rather than going straight to the council.
Right, and we do have a motion and a second on that. So as long as that stands, we will take a vote on that motion. And before Commissioner Alchel, I see your hand. I would support what Mr. Kehoe is saying, because although I think our city attorney's recommended language for section 6 works, I'm not sure that I can support, I'm not sure that the rest of the sections are worded in a way that supports that conclusion, like section 5 in particular, talking about how it meets the goals kind of seems in conflict with that to me. So I would like a more revised resolution, but Commissioner Alchel, you had your hand up?
Yes, I was going to say, I like Director Kehoe's idea about revisiting this and taking everything we've said and the public has said tonight into consideration in its analysis. And I would also suggest if that's the way it goes, that they also study the traffic and parking situation along with it to avoid any additional congestion to the residential component of this particular zone.
Chair.
Yeah, so several of you raise your hands and I just find myself like shaking my head at you like I would in a public meeting. So I'm not being weird shaking my head here. I'm trying to acknowledge you even though you don't know it's you that I'm talking to. So I'm very self-conscious of my image here, but Commissioner Hoopengarter had her hand up, and then Vice Chair Erickson. I also saw you, Commissioner Cavallero. So we'll go in that order.
Yeah, I would like to suggest that while staff may be able to come up with some alternative recommendations, we do have a motion on the floor. And I believe we should have that vote. And should staff wish to revise, represent, it would be my very firm recommendation that they do what we asked for when this first came around and treat these as separate properties, differently zoned, differently treated, differently addressed with different concerns.
Vice Chair Erickson?
Yeah, I was going to introduce a substitute motion to return this to staff to come back
on the first one.
A substitute motion precedes the original motion. So if the motion for substitute would pass, then the other motion fails. So
so there's a substitute motion to return this to staff. Is there a second to that one, or?
Well,
So
I
if there's no second,
wish to expand on that.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I think I got cut off. I was gonna make a substitute motion, return this to staff to take into all the commissioners' considerations, including I think Commissioner Hoopengartner's last point, and come back. I'm happy to put a date certain to it to the commission to talk about it, but I don't want to. And John, please help me. If it's, I don't want to time constrain you, but that would be my substitute motion to return this to staff to take into the commission's comments, concerns, the public, everything that Commissioner Alchel also said, and come back to the commission at a date in the near future. I don't know if I could say near, and the staff could figure out when that near, how you would define near.
So that would be fine because that way we would be required to provide additional notice to residents, and I think that's fine.
I'll second that substitute motion.
I'll second that. I'll second Commissioner Erickson's motion. If that's procedurally correct, to take that out of order without voting on the original motion made by Commissioner Jones.
So I'll proceed with, I believe a substitute motion is the first thing we vote on. And if it passes, then it supersedes the initial motion. If it fails, then we'll take a vote on the initial motion. So if Commissioner Erickson's motion passes, we're done. If it fails, then we go back and we vote on Commissioner Jones's motion.
So will you accept my second?
So yeah, we have a second from Commissioner Buckner on Commissioner Erickson's motion. So any further discussion before we vote on this? I think we all know where we're at.
Can you restate the motion again? The substitute motion? Sorry.
Sure, Commissioner. My motion is to return this item to staff and to have staff take into all the concerns not only brought up by the members of the public, but as well as all of the commissioners' comments today that were made up. I can't capture them all. I think as long as I'm sure staff knows what they all are, and then come back to us, the commission, at a near date in the future with hopefully refined items that, we can talk about.
Thank you.
David, could you please call the roll? This is on the substitute.
Thank you. Vice Chair Erickson.
Yes.
Commissioner Buckner.
Yes.
Commissioner Jones.
No.
Commissioner Hoopengarner.
No.
Commissioner Elchel.
Yes.
Commissioner Carvalero.
Yes.
Chair Bass.
Yes.
Motion carries. 5 ayes, 2 noes. This is remanded back to staff.
Thank you.
Thank you all. So we're 2 hours into this meeting. Does anyone need a break at this point in time before?
Yes. I'm getting glued to this chair.
Actually, let me pull up my agenda because I think we're now at, did somebody call my?
Item 11A.
We do have 11A. That's gonna take at least 10 minutes for staff to present. And then I'm guessing we will have some questions and all of that. Would you prefer the break now or after that item?
Now.
Now.
No, it's been 2 hours.
Yes. Zoom meetings are difficult.
And
So
Chair-
we will reconvene. We'll try to be back here in 5 minutes. We'll reconvene in about 5 minutes.
That'll be 8:40.
Thank you all.
please?
Sure.
Is that going to be enough?
No, it'll have to be.
Do you want it in the short,
Mhm.
out of the bottle, or in the cup?
The cup, please.
I think we're all back.
computer.
If the rest of the commission is,
I won't, thank you.
okay, we're almost all back. Okay, we're all here. David, are you ready?
Yes, we are ready.
Okay. Then we will begin our meeting again with the next item on our agenda, which is item 11A, new business, Senate Bill 743 update. And I believe staff has about a 10-minute presentation. And so I would ask the commission to hold questions until the end of that presentation, just so that we can do it in an orderly way. And I will turn it over to staff at this point.
Great, thank you, Chair. Bob Chung, Senior Transportation Planner with Long Range Planning. With me tonight is Theron Pierce, our traffic consultant, John Mugridge, and Chelsea Richer. The item before you tonight is Senate Bill 743 or SB 743, update to the CEQA transportation section. This item was brought before you in June of this year. Since then, staff has done additional research and we have modified our recommendation, and that's the subject of tonight's meeting. I will go into those changes shortly. Some quick background and context. SB 743 was signed into law in 2013. In 2017, OPR, or the Office of Planning and Research, published their official guidelines. The main goal of SB 743 is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The transportation sector contributes about half of the greenhouse gas emissions in the state. The goal is to encourage more uses, diverse uses, placing employment and housing and retail closer together so there's less driving, and also encouraging the use of multimodal transportation networks. The main changes to CEQA is that automobile delay, or LOS, is no longer considered a significant impact. In this place is vehicle miles travel, or VMT, and I will get into the differences of these two. LOS is a way of measuring delay, and it's basically focused on the driver perspective. Letter grade from A to F, A meaning is free flow and F is congested. What this has done, LOS has done, and the state has recognized this, is that it has created longer travel and also separated housing and work further apart. In urbanized areas where you have a lot of work centers, level service tends to be worse, and that in effect has encouraged more development away from the congested areas, and that has contributed to longer commutes. And so instead of using level service, the state has now mandated the use of vehicles miles travel, and is basically the measurement of how far vehicles travel, or drivers travel in their vehicles. Staff previously recommended stringing out multifamily residential, either standalone or within mixed-use projects. And since then, again, staff has done additional research and looked at whether this accomplishes the goals that's set forth by the state. And we recognize that by screening out just multifamily alone doesn't really achieve the goals and objectives of what the state is trying to do. Again, the state is trying to encourage more housing near work and retail so that there's less driving or shorter distance of driving. And to that end, staff is amending our recommendation to screen out both residential and commercial developments which is consistent with what OPR's guidelines recommends. So what OPR's recommendation is to consider screening out all projects within a high quality transit area, except for the following exclusionary criteria. A project that has less than 0.75 FAR, if a project has offers more parking than what is required by code, if the project is not consistent with sustainable community strategies, or it replaces affordable housing with market or moderate income units. These are the four criteria that's set forth by OPR. Staff also recommends adding another criteria. So if a project has the potential for a regional traffic draw, it also would not be considered screening out. So what that means is these oddball projects that are unique in use and has a potential to draw from a longer distance for both users and employees, then they would also have to, they would not be exempt, and they would go through a detailed VMT analysis. So what is a high quality transit? Well, OPR's recommendation is that a site containing existing rail transit station or ferry terminal served by either a bus or rail transit service, or the intersection of two or more major bus routes with a frequency of service interval of 15 minutes or less during morning and afternoon peak periods. Staff has looked into the high quality transit area as it relates to West Hollywood and their boundaries. And according to the SCAG database, the entire city of West Hollywood is within a high quality transit area. Additionally, staff looked at other factors to also justify our recommendation. So we looked at the SCAG's Regional Transportation Plan VMT analysis. And what we found is that 100% of our residential trips in West Hollywood are below SCAG's regional average. And the work trips, 86% are below SCAG's regional average. If you combine both residential and work trips together, 92% of our VMT is also below the regional average. So that also helps with our justification in our recommendation. Now, screening out projects doesn't mean that projects have no responsibility or they won't be analyzed for traffic impacts. First of all, we have a standing TDM ordinance that requires commercial projects over 5,000 square feet to include 4 to 8 TDM strategies. These are VMT reducing strategies such as biking and lockers and other like bus subsidies. We also require residential projects that have more than 10 units to implement at least 3 to 5 TDM strategies. So if you think about it, if a project, let's say, did have a VMT impact, these would be the same mitigation measures that we would be looking into to offset those impacts. So in other words, we are excluding or proposing to screen out projects that are in high quality transit areas that does not meet any of the exclusionary criteria. And on top of that, they still have to further reduce their VMT count through TDM strategies. Now, we know that this is a major transition between how we used to do things and what the state law now requires. So in helping us making that transition, staff is still recommending that all traffic impact reports provide LOS analysis, just like we did before. The only exception is that it's no longer a CEQA impact. So this is information only for decision makers and our public to consider when projects come before you. We also recommend that the neighborhood impact analysis still be provided. These are our neighborhood roadway analysis to ensure that commercial projects don't contribute too much traffic into our neighborhoods. So that concludes my presentation. It was really quick. Staff is available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you could, perfect, thank you. Do any of the commissioners have questions at this time? Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Yeah, Bob, it's a question, but it's also, I think it's important to share with our viewing public. The definition of SCAG, for people who may not understand what SCAG is, the Southern California Association of Governments, the statement in particular that concerns me is the fact that 100% of all of our trips are below the SCAG average. And I believe there's 191 cities in SCAG. Is that correct?
I'm not quite sure if that's the correct figure, but it sounds in the ballpark.
Okay. And over multiple counties, all of Southern California. So for us to state that 100% of our trips are shorter than the average for SCAG, we're talking about neighborhoods, regions where they're going from Temecula to San Diego to get to work, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure that the data that we're talking about, everyone really understands the metrics and you know, data, you can do lots of fun things with data. That's it.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm seeing none. David, do we have any public speakers on this item?
We have no public speakers on this item.
Okay, so since we have a lot of people on the call, if there's anybody on the call who wants to speak on this item who's not identified, not on David's list, I'll give you just a moment here to unmute yourself. I think he said that was *6 and let us know at this point in time. So hearing none, this is mostly a receive and file item, but I see Bob raising his hand. So is there something else?
Yeah, I forgot to include that this item did go to our Transportation Commission, and they did not have any objections to staff's recommendation, and they generally support our recommendation as well.
Great. Is this an item that you are requesting action from us on, Bob, or is
No,
it
this item will be going to City Council on the 16th of December, and we want to make sure that we hear your concerns or any issues that you may have so we can relay that to the City Council.
Great. Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Just one comment, Bob. I thank you for adding number 5. A project with the potential for significant regional draw. I'm hoping that when that goes to council, we can flesh that out a little bit more so that we define what significant is. When I read that, what flashed in my mind was the, at one point, proposed Cohen Brothers project to replace the bus depot and the sheriff's department with a megalicious, ginormous, multi-towered, hundreds and hundreds of seats, amphitheaters, etc. And I have no idea where that stands, etc. But that picture flashed in my mind, and I would certainly classify that as a significant regional draw. But I'm hoping that maybe we can wrap a little better words around significant when we go to council.
Will do. Those are exactly the type of projects that we had in mind as well when we drafted this criteria.
Yeah, that was my concern because it's like exemplary design, right? And how long that took us to Lauren, I'm sorry if I triggered you on that comment. I saw you smile. But understanding the ways in which we, I think, just defined that, and I think it's taken a number of years to do that. I think significant projects, especially with major infrastructure projects that are, projected to come to the city, when we look at expansions of public transit that might allow and open up ways, and I think the city into really new and exciting ways that we would have to look at what those stations are or what those areas would be. I think that I'm thinking of a few. I'm sure you probably are thinking the same ones I am, Bob. And so how would we define significant? Because I think it's a little too nondescript at the moment.
Right. So our recommendation is really to gear towards streamlining projects that are neighborhood serving, right? Like the laundromats, the car wash, the local restaurants, bars. Those are the ones that we feel will not contribute significant VMT. These again are neighborhood serving type of retail, and we don't want to have them have to go and endure through the secret process because of that.
But by nature and their size, wouldn't they be exempt from CEQA anyway?
Not if they're within the mixed use project. So, take for example, a sizable mixed use project, but it's made up of these type of uses. This is exactly why we want to exclude those from a long, lengthy CEQA process, because again, we're focusing on VMT. We're not focusing on number of trips or congestion. That's state law. So by focusing on just VMT, we're comfortable in saying, look, these are the neighborhood serving retail that don't draw regional trips. Like Walgreens or those kind of places. They're very ubiquitous throughout the region, and no one's going to drive 30 miles to go to a Walgreens. So these are types of projects we like to streamline and again, avoid having lengthy secret processes.
And I just want to commend you, Bob, because this is a really complex law. It is really dense, and I think you wrote a really great staff report. So I just think that you did a really good job on this item. So I just want to say thank you on that, because it's really hard to follow with all of these new updates and what that means and all of the implications. And I just want to commend you and the rest of staff for this item.
Thank you. It was a group effort.
Great. Anyone else? Then I want to also thank you for bringing this to us and for your incredible work. And I guess without objection, we'll receive and file the item. And I think that's all we need to do. Or do you need an actual act? Anything more formal than that?
Nope, that's good enough.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So at this point in our agenda, we are going to go back to an item that we moved, item 10A, which is a public hearing for 8743 Sunset Boulevard. And we officially continue this item from October 15th. Before we move on this item, several members of our commission are going to have to recuse. And so I'm going to call on you each to state the reason for your recusal, and then we will proceed. So Commissioner Buckner. And also, if you have any additional commissioner comments that would come at the end of the meeting, I certainly would entertain those at this point in time.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I'm going to need to recuse because I'm within the 500-foot radius of this project. However, I understand that that's the rule, but there's no way that this is going to impact my, really impact my property. But I understand the rule, and so because of that, I'm going to recuse, and it's not going to affect the value of my property one way or the other, that's for sure. So that's it. There's already a billboard there, and it's not going to make any difference what's on it, frankly. So good night, everybody.
Commissioner Buckner, you muted, but we're all wishing you a good night, and we'll miss you for the rest of the week.
That was an accident. I'm still not doing that great on this laptop. Take care. Everybody, good night. Thank you very much for a good meeting. Thank you.
And Commissioner Cavallero?
Yeah, I need to recuse myself because I'm actually working on a project that falls within the Sunset Billboard program. So it's a conflict of interest. Everybody have a great evening. I hope we all get good news in the next couple of days, and we'll see you at the next meeting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Erickson?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have to recuse myself because assuming all results stay the way they are, I will be seeing this item as a council member. And since this is a way in which we have to be fair and impartial, I do not want to take or make any public claims that would assume impartiality before me or having already weighed in on it. So we can have a fair process once I am on the city council. So I am recusing myself for that reason. And I don't think this is my last meeting with you all, so I won't bid you all farewell. You know, it's up in the air. We'll see. But wishing you all well. Please stay safe. COVID numbers are rising, so please make sure you're staying home and staying safe. And hopefully we all wake up tomorrow to a better day. So sending you all lots of love. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for being here. Good night. Okay, so commissioners, we only have 4 of us here, which is a bare quorum. So I've been asked by staff to remind the commission that we all have to stay for this entire item. If we leave, then we've no longer have a quorum. So please just stay on camera and stay with us throughout this item. So if anyone needs
beverage refill, I'm here. I'm really here.
Okay. So with that said, I think our colleagues have left us, and so we are prepared to move forward. So I will turn this over to staff.
Good evening. This is Jennifer Davis. I'm a contract planner for Planning and Development Services, and nice to be here. Let me share my screen. All right, can everyone see that, just to make sure? Yeah, okay, great. So this tonight is an application for a certificate of appropriateness, development agreement, zoning map amendment, and a sign permit. And this is for a converted digital billboard at 8743 Sunset. Just a sec. Okay. The commission is basically here to determine that this proposed digital billboard meets the relevant standards of the new Sunset Boulevard offsite signing policy. I will now call that policy henceforth, so I don't have to say that whole long thing again, and the general plan and the zoning code. This is the first billboard permit approval under this new policy. This is the vicinity map. It's at the northeast corner of Sherbourne and Sunset Boulevard. This is the existing building and the existing billboard. The Historic Preservation Commission has reviewed the certificate of appropriateness in August and found that it met the Secretary of Interior standards, no new impacts on the cultural resource, and it recommended approval to the City Council. Just want to note there have been no modifications to the project after HBC reviewed this. Only the development agreement was further finalized. This is the existing static one-sided billboard. It overhangs the building and it has a support pole that is tucked behind the rear facade of this building. And this is the proposed digital billboard. It again is also one-sided and has what we're calling an invisible or floating frame, hence we call it the floating billboard. This billboard was screened for design excellence along with many other ones, and it was chosen to proceed forward for an application. We'll just take a minute to talk about the policy. It is an innovative billboard policy adopted in March 2019. It's the first comprehensive billboard update for offsite signage along Sunset Strip, really since the Sunset Specific Plan. It governs all billboards, tall walls, and creative advertising on Sunset. It allows new billboards on cultural resources as part of major renovations and as part of new development. The policy, as implemented, will allow Sunset Boulevard to be sort of the place for digital advertising, allowing new artistic, creative billboards, and it will sort of update the concept of what billboards can be with its technology, shapes, unique placements, and design. The policy also, an important part of the policy is public art. 17.5% of the content of all these digital billboards will be used for arts and arts programming. So this billboard program will create a sort of outdoor digital arts museum. Policy also requires public benefit, and that public benefit is defined by the policy itself. For this particular billboard, there's an annual payment of $850,000, discounted for the first 2 years to accommodate installation and construction, and then a 3% annual increase starting in year 4. Another public benefit is that the building must be continually occupied, or that annual payment has to be increased significantly. Also, it's required that the historic building is upkept and maintained. The billboard must also use green energy practices. And again, there's significant public and arts programming. City can also preempt contact for emergency messages. Just a little bit of detail about the policy. The policy covers how the sites were awarded, the opportunity to even apply for the sign permit, billboard permit. It governs what types of signs are permitted and the standards for each of those signs. It talks about in detail lighting and operational standards, architectural lighting, and the requirements for temporary billboards and tall wall signs. Every new digital billboard requires the approval of a development agreement, and that details all the requirements and community benefits. Development agreement is a device that allows the applicant to have vested rights in exchange for public benefit. I'm going to go through quickly sort of the images of the proposed billboard. This is the site plan. The red outline here, if you can see it, is the existing billboard, and the black is the new. Largely in the same place, same angle, largely same height. The sign area is the same. This is the west elevation from Sherborne. South elevation from Sunset. This is looking as if you were on Sunset Boulevard on the sidewalk looking up at it. And this slide starts to talk about how this floating billboard will look and what the technology is. And I'm going to sort of leave that to the architect on this project to go into a little bit more detail. He knows better than I how this works. This is the back of the existing billboard and the proposed back of the new billboard. Again, it's reflecting the environment that it's in. The next few slides show the billboard in context along Sunset Boulevard, so I thought these were very useful graphics. So the pink is the new billboard, the blue are existing billboards, and this is looking westward from Sunset Plaza. This is looking eastward, and this is the proposed billboard, existing blue billboards. This is looking eastward a little closer to the site. Here's the building and the billboard. This digital billboard conforms with all of the relevant standards of the policy. Now, not all standards in the policy are relevant to all of the projects, but where the standards are relevant, this digital billboard meets them in terms of size, height, location, relationship to sidewalk, the fact that it's a digital conversion, and the lighting and operational standards will be covered as a requirement in the resolution as a condition of approval. The development agreement ensures that the public benefit requirement is met. So staff's recommendation is to adopt resolutions PC 2013-68, PC 2013-69, PC 2013-70, recommending respectively that City Council approve the development agreement, the zoning map amendment, and a sign permit and certificate of appropriateness. allowing a digital conversion of the existing static billboard at 8743 Sunset Boulevard. And hold on a minute. I am available for questions, as is Brian and myself. Sorry, I was checking a text. Okay,
Thank you very much. Do any of my, Commissioner Hoopengarner, you have questions?
I do. And a comment. I think you might need to do some housekeeping on your resolutions. The names of the resolutions have some, I think, missing words and some spellings. But my questions, and maybe some of these can be directed to the architect, but the materials being used on the back of the billboard, what is the reflective nature of that material? And the same actually for the front of the billboard. So I'm thinking of a morning sun hitting that back of that billboard and bouncing back into the eyes of people driving westbound on Sunset. Can you speak to that?
I do think that's probably better answered by the architect.
Okay.
But they probably are going to be better at that. Excellent.
I have quite a few questions about the development agreement. I don't know if that's best discussed now or when we go to comments. Should we just go to the architect and have their presentation? I mean, I'm not to preempt my colleagues from asking their questions, but is now the time to discuss the development agreement as well that's in the staff report?
I would say if there are questions that, this is just my perspective, and our city attorney and staff can correct me if they think otherwise. I would love it if those questions will inform public comment, then it's probably good if they need to know that before they publicly comment. But I don't want to get into deliberations before we hear from the public, because that's not fair to them either. So it's a fine line to walk, but that's the one I would hope we would walk.
Understood. And I will get out my tightrope and my ballet slippers and see.
You're very good at it usually, so I trust you.
Okay, so I skipped right to the juicy bits, the money on the development agreement, and had a couple of questions on both how calculations are going to be made, how the benefits, how the various pieces are going to be decided. And so let me just jump into it. Let's talk about the items about the city gets a minimum of 17.5% of the programming time to devote to art and civic announcements, okay? But then there is language in here that the city has the ability to sell back any time that they don't use back to the developer to use for advertising. My question is, I didn't see anywhere in this development agreement the mechanism for that process and who's going to decide it and who's going to negotiate the price. In other words, the city this year decides they're only going to use 10% of the art budget and they're going to sell back the other 7.5%. Who's going to make that negotiation, and how is that going to be transparent to the citizens of the city?
I'm going to defer to Brian, who was most active in the development agreement formation.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Arts Commission will be responsible for the programming time. And so we do assume that they will use all 17.5% of it. However, we wanted to introduce some flexibility in the case that there was some leftover time. I know the applicant team has indicated that they would not purchase the time back from the city, that if it was to be exchanged, that it would have to be given back to them. Now, I think with other teams that might be forthcoming with this program, it might be different, and we can, I think, better institute how that negotiation takes place and how that price is agreed upon.
I think one of my concerns here is that we're setting a precedent for all of these other billboards, and that this development agreement is kind of setting a baseline, and that we ought to try and do it as well as we possibly can. Okay, so Yeah, and this question is back to who decides and how is that transparent? That isn't necessarily going to be spoken to in the development agreement with this applicant, but is there a city policy in place that says who's going to do that thing?
There is not a formal adopted city policy on that. I'm trying to think if there's similar provisions in the Sun Spectacular. There might be some precedent for this. I'd have to get back on that specifically, but the development agreement is in draft form at this stage, and we do have the opportunity to address those things when it advances to the city council.
Okay. On page 13 of the staff report, in item number 5, the owner operator shall pay a public benefit equal to the greater of $850,000 annually, or 30% of the gross revenue generated by the billboard. On the actual development agreement, I see different language, and so I'm wondering which is correct and what we're voting on. Because on page, not numbered, item 4.1.1.1. Minimum annual guaranteed payment is a whole chart by year of a guaranteed payment, which is correct.
So that chart shows the minimum annual guarantee along with the 3% escalation that happens in year 4. For each year, they and this is a unique circumstance because the applicant here is Netflix, so they're not traditionally selling advertising. If their gross receipts exceeded, if 30% exceeded what that minimum annual guarantee was, the city would get that payment amount. And so that's where it escalates each year, and that would be evaluated on a yearly basis.
Well, thank you. That brings up a really good question, Brian. Since this is Netflix and they are essentially selling this airtime to themselves, that is not an arm's length market transaction necessarily. So how is that going to be established? Because they could say, you know, and I'm just being really facetious here, but they could easily say, well, you know, we're selling ourselves advertising and it's worth $1.95. And so therefore the gross revenue is $1.95. And here's your 30% of $1.95.
Brian, great question. And that's why the minimum annual guarantee is so important. And that was established based on the value of this project, regardless of the operator, whether it was a traditional advertising company or Netflix itself. And it also allows, and we do have every belief that Netflix will continue to be the operator of this, but should it revert to a traditional advertising entity, that the city would then be protected in that case, meaning that we wouldn't lose out on value. So this is being structured in a way to account for both a Netflix or a traditional advertising entity.
Okay, so, but that brings up the point of transferability of the development agreement. And given what we went through with AKA, do we anticipate the city being able to renegotiate a development agreement upon sale, or is the idea that it becomes an asset of the developer, which they can then transact as they will?
So the provision in there that is meant to address that speaks specifically to if there is a transfer of this, that there is a meeting that is required with the city so that the future owner understands the obligations in place of the development agreement.
I saw that.
Yeah.
But the city has no rights other than to say, you got to take a meeting.
Correct. And that is just how development agreements are typically structured. And, you know, it allows for that long-term assurances in exchange for those, what are extraordinary public benefits.
Okay, I think those are my questions for now. Thank you for very good answers.
Thank you for the questions, Commissioner Garner. Commissioner Jones or Commissioner Altschul, do either one of you have questions at this time?
No, I
do
was
not,
just going
thank
to
you.
address one of Lynn's questions. And it's my understanding that the negotiation of these things is under the auspices of the city manager or his designee. And
Okay,
Lauren
so
can confirm that. Or
That is correct, Commissioner Altschul. Yes.
okay. Before we move on to the applicant's presentation, which we will do next, I would like to do disclosures at this point in time. So do any of my colleagues have disclosures to make?
No.
Commissioner Jones?
I do. I just want to note for the record that I had a meeting with the applicant and the applicant's representatives, and we discussed items contained in the staff report. It was via a Zoom meeting. I also just want to quickly note that I have discussed with the city attorney, as I do work in advertising, although it is social and digital advertising and not out of home, that I did discuss any potential conflicts of interest because of the Netflix thing, and we identified that there were none. So I just wanted to make sure that's clear for the record. Thank you.
Commissioner Hoopengartner, I think you.
No.
None? And Commissioner Altschul?
I had a conversation with the city attorney about the issue of my necessity or not of recusing myself. And I also had a brief conversation with the applicant's representative, which was very brief.
Thank you. And my disclosure is that I met with the applicant and the team via Zoom. We discussed only items contained in the staff report, and I also visited the site. So with that, we will turn the meeting over to the applicant's representative. You have 10 minutes, and you will then have 5 minutes after public comment to make any sort of rebuttal at that point in time. So I turn it over to you, Mr. Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Jeff Seymour. I'm with Seymour Consulting Group and I reside in Westlake Village. On behalf of Netflix and our private project team, we are proud to bring to you the very first digital sign awarded by way of the Sunset Boulevard off-site signage policy. First and foremost, we wish to commend staff, especially Brian Eck and Jennifer Davis, for the time and energy they provided on behalf of this project. We hope you'll agree that this sign atop this particular building merits your recommendation of support to the City Council. At this time, I will be giving the floor over to Ben Anderson of Office Untitled, our project architect. He will be followed by Chris Bombright, the project's owner, property owner. Chris is also, as you know, a longtime supporter and restaurateur here in West Hollywood. At the end of our initial comments, we'll go to our 5 minutes, and both Reshma Pendleton, the U.S. strategy manager for Netflix, and I will provide closing remarks during rebut. In addition, for your information, Jeremy Kolab, our project manager, and Sharuni Patibanda, our legal counsel, are here to respond to questions. Ben Anderson, it's yours. Ben?
We can't hear anything.
I see a screen. Ben, are you on mute? I think that's his Is that any better? Yeah, there we go. We got you.
Sorry about that. I was on my phone. It will be hard for me to hear you from my computer, but at this point, I'm just going to talk. Thank you very much. Very excited to present to all the commissioners. And thank you to Jennifer for the introduction. I think we covered some of the basics, so I'll just jump right into kind of how we arrived at this design. I'm very, very proud to present the project on behalf of the entire project team, who Jeff just introduced. And I think what's really exciting about where we stand today is clearly there's a rich legacy of creative signage in the city of West Hollywood and along Sunset Boulevard as sort of as sort of made famous by, signs like the Marlboro Man or the rock and roll billboards of the 1970s, and most recently with Sunset Spectacular. And so here we sort of stand at like a version 4.0 of this with this program, which is incredibly exciting. However, for the historic category, the cultural resources category, it adds an extra layer. And that's kind of an opportunity for us to look back in time, understand the kind of era or the architectural styles that were in play when the building that we sit above was constructed. And it's really sort of the classic golden era of development on the Sunset Strip, when it was an in-between space between where the talent was living in Beverly Hills and where it was working in Hollywood. And so our building at 8743 Sunset, which we've called the Constance Bennett Building, was built in 1936, a beautiful example of Georgian Revival architecture, and thankfully has been restored to pristine condition thanks to ownership. Constance Bennett was an incredible woman, highest paid actress in her time, incredibly successful entrepreneur in her own right, self-represented herself. The list goes on and on and on. And she commissioned this building. She was a real estate developer. And as it relates to our assignment and how do you create a relationship between a modern billboard and cultural resource, we sort of went back to the basics to really distill what it means to be Georgian Revival. So the things that kind of typify or codify that architectural style are simple geometric form, symmetrical facades, and decorative patterning. And so as that applies to what we do with a billboard that sits above a building like that is clearly, per the Secretary of Interior standards, we don't want to mimic the style. We certainly don't want to compete against the resource. So we came up with this idea of basically trying to make the billboard disappear. And that really begs the question of how do you make a billboard disappear? And the simple answer is that you make it invisible. So here we are with the invisible frame, effectively architecture trying to camouflage itself and creating simultaneously new forms of spectacle on the Sunset Strip. What you're looking at is a entirely LED digital surface. The 14 by 48 billboard advertisement area that we're limited to is shown with the Netflix advertisement here. And what we're proposing is an additional 3 feet of LED board on all sides and along the column front, that through a series of camera systems on the back of the billboard, we can capture ambient sky and lighting conditions, whether it be a cloudy day or a sunny day, early morning light, evening sunsets, and project those onto the front of the LED board. And in doing so, from a given vantage point on Sunset Strip, create the appearance and the phenomenon that the advertising content is in fact floating. And so that was one of a series of strategies that we wanted to take to be as respectful as we could to the historic resource by making it effectively disappear, whether that's visually mitigating the impact of the historic resource, or as we mentioned earlier, really trying to create a sense of spectacle and awe that is very much in keeping with the history and the legacy of outdoor signage on the Sunset Strip. How do we do that? I've mentioned a little bit the sort of back camera system. So that is in fact going to be capturing whatever is going on in the sky. It'll be live footage, and it will be sort of run through a series of software programs that then find a way to match the perspective from a given point on Sunset. There's an example here. There are proofs of concepts out there about how to do this. This was an installation of an LED screen draped over a vehicle with a camera system behind, so it's effectively making that vehicle feel or seem invisible. We believe that this is the first of its kind in the world. So again, trying to build on the legacy of a really world's firsts or kind of must-see moments on the Sunset Strip. The kit of parts we're doing to do that, as I mentioned before, is LED frame. So that's a 3-foot frame around the limited 14 by 48 LED billboard. And then on the back side, we're sort of pursuing an alternate strategy of architectural camouflage by letting a series of metal panels that can be perforated or painted down near the bottom of the building to begin to take on some of the ambient light conditions. It will not be mirrored. It won't be a 1-for-1, but as the image that Jennifer had shared, some form of just absorbing a little bit of the ambient light will help cut down on the fact that this is sitting there. And clearly it's trying to be a good neighbor by cladding the back of a billboard, which is usually pretty unattractive. The last strategy is through form. So rather than have a fairly dense, large, massive object floating above the cultural resource, we sort of took a page out of the Apple industrial design playbook, which is all about sort of chamfering and reducing the bezel edges of the element. So really what you see from street is as minimized as possible. Lastly, it's just more content. So for the period of time that was mentioned before, the 17.5%, or for certain kind of cultural events, we're able to either accentuate the content that is advertisement via the invisible frame, blow it out all the way in what we're calling kind of full takeover mode for festivals. But what gets really interesting is, that invisible effect can extend beyond simply the frame. The entire billboard can have this invisible effect. So you can begin to have really, really engaging creative content for the actual advertisements. Things can effectively float in midair, which also begins to become a really, I think, interesting creative prompt for the artists who will inevitably be tasked with inhabiting this creative space. So really an exciting way to kind of expand the idea of creativity through content, not just through form. Here's a view basically with the version 3.0, which we had called out earlier, the Sunset Spectacular and ours in context. And Jennifer had done a good job of describing the new placement of the proposed billboard and the overall elevations. I'm happy to take questions if there's specific ones. And I will revisit the question from Commissioner Hoopengarner about the reflectivity in a moment, but I'm going to pass it off to Chris.
You have 2 minutes left.
Good evening, commissioners. On behalf of my partners at Sunset Sherborne and myself, I want to say thank you for your service and for this opportunity to present before you. My partners and I love West Hollywood. We love our community, and we are passionate about, proud of, and devoted to 8743 Sunset. We are in this for the long term. I think it's also important to share that our partnership with Netflix on this project has been one of the most enjoyable and inspirational collaborations of my 35-year career. Reshma Pendleton and the entire Netflix team have proven themselves to be not only extraordinarily creative, but absolutely honorable and dependable every step of the way. We are beyond proud to be partnering with Netflix on this first of its kind, highly innovative offering. Everyone involved in this project has poured their hearts and souls into creating what we believe will become a beloved cultural icon for our community for decades to come. Thank you for your consideration.
That will conclude our initial comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I know Ben said he was going to come back to the reflective comment. Is that now or in your rebuttal?
You can be now.
We're out of time, but I'm happy to address it now.
Can you address that briefly since that was raised as a question earlier?
Okay. We're actively working with the digital sign fabricator on how to avoid the increase in reflectivity. We are, as I mentioned earlier, not looking at a polished mirrored finish. The material that we're proposing now is a mixture of different size perforations. So the perforation allows us to draw down just the ambient brightness or the amount of light that's reflected off of that metal panel. But we're also looking at ways of treating an aluminum panel in a way that helps further cut down on any potential reflectivity. So it's not quite a matte finish, but it is still a metallic finish, but it is in no way going to be mirrored or have the type of reflectivity, Commissioner Hoopengarner, that I think you're concerned about.
Thank you very much. So that's the end of the applicant's presentation. Are there questions now that we should ask before we go to public comment from the commission? Yes, please, Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Button's not clicking. There we go. Thank you. Just a couple quick ones. You spoke a little bit to the application and you showed it in a draped technology over the car. Obviously, this is very, just not cutting edge, but bleeding edge. So I would have some concerns about, actually pulling it off. And how, how we make sure we don't end up with sort of dead space in the air. And you don't have to answer that this moment, but it is one of my concerns that I'd like you to maybe consider in your response after public comment. Let's see. Question. I like how you spoke to the chamfered edges on the panel itself. Is there an opportunity to chamfer the edges of the base support as well to mimic that same graded, that trimming of the imposing nature of the pole?
Should I address that now?
Sure.
Okay, sorry. Just never want to step on anybody's toes. The short answer is we have thinned this up to the extreme. And I have personally put the sign manufacturers through the ringer. I think in some ways they didn't know what they were getting into when we started to talk about it. So we have reconfigured the structure multiple times. And really the largest impact would have been on the back of the actual billboard. The pole, which is supporting the structure, that is as narrow as we can get it. What drives it is the bolt attachment plate from the piece of pipe that comes out of the ground and is part of the foundation.
Sure.
And attaches to it. And so that really drives the thickness of it. But this is, to the inch, as tight as we've been able to get it.
Okay, thank you. I think my other question was, where has this tech been done? And the answer is no place. So thank you.
There's a few places, again, a sort of more of an arts installation standpoint, where it's been proven to be able to use cameras to match a given perspective and put that image onto a surface, whether it be a car, or there was a slide that we had where it was on an individual's jacket. So the software and the sort of proof of concept is there. It's merely putting it on sort of a surface of this size, and articulating it, in a way where it's intended to make the content appear to float. For simplicity's sake, we've kept the 14:48 advertisement as shown, but we fully anticipate that, because the surface that content sits on would appear to be invisible, that it really encourages people to think creatively about not just putting a 14:48 billboard up there, but while always maintaining the 672 square feet that we're allowed, be a little bit more playful with that. So that's really where the innovation and the sort of the world's first aspect of it comes from.
I think, thank you, because my concern is precisely that, the size of the application. And I think we've all seen those digital billboards where, a third of the lights aren't working and you got this whole blippity flippity thing going on, and it really looks kind of cheap. And I think that would be my biggest concern, is that we not end up with this experiment in the middle of our city that turned out to be a fail. So I'm very appreciative of all your efforts to dot all the I's and cross all the T's.
Thank you.
Flippity flippity. I like that better than the descriptions I would come up with. So, Commissioner Jones or Commissioner Altschul, do you have questions at this time, or should we move to public comment?
I have no questions.
Okay. So, David, if you could, I know that we have public speakers on this. If you could manage that process again for us, I would appreciate it.
Yes, I have a couple confirmed speakers. I'm showing a few people in the queue still. If you do want to speak on this item, just hit *9. That'll let me know that you are interested in speaking when we're finished with the ones that have been confirmed. Our first public speaker will be Cole Ettman. Cole, go ahead and do *6 and state your name and city of residence, and you have 3 minutes to speak. You can go ahead, Cole.
Thank you very much. Cole Ettman, live in the city of West Hollywood. I live a block away in the same building as Commissioner Alshul in the Shoreham Towers. And I got to say, you know, it looks beautiful, but I heard the word spectacle and awe as what you're trying to do here. I have to tell you, I can't cross the street there without an electric billboard. For whatever reason, the city doesn't want to put in traffic mitigation to cross that street, Sunset Boulevard. It's like crossing a drag race, and not the kind we like in West Hollywood. I think we have to continue to be aware and cognizant that there's a whole host of people who live north of Sunset Boulevard. And just to get a pint of Haagen-Dazs, you probably have to walk the furthest than all of West Hollywood. And the billboard goes along the same point. We need to care about residents here, and this is a safety issue. And, you know, one commissioner told me that the city of West Hollywood, the city council, wants to make Sunset Boulevard like Times Square. And we see what's going on with one building after the next. And what about all of us who live north of Sunset? You know, our quality of life is dwindling with every single project. And while this is a great idea, it doesn't belong there. The true part of the Sunset Strip with the Roxy and the Viper Room and the Whiskey is quite a few blocks in another direction. We have residents that live here, we have restaurants, and I urge you guys to vote no on this project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ettman. Our next public speaker is Victor Omolchenko. Victor, you have 3 minutes. Start at 6, please. Go ahead, Victor.
Okay, I'm Victor Omolchenko speaking on behalf of the West Hollywood Preservation Alliance. Let me mute this here. Oops. Oh. And Section 4.6 of the Draft Development Agreement, which is Attachment A of Exhibit A in your staff report, has garbled wording that needs to be corrected, especially in its first sentence. But that Section 4.6, which is labeled Cultural Resources, it does say the first phrase, the owner shall cause the building to be maintained in good condition. The West Hollywood Preservation Alliance urges the Planning Commission to consider elevating the phrase maintained in good condition to maintained in excellent condition. Good is not good enough. This historically designated cultural resource in the city of West Hollywood deserves to be kept in excellent condition by the owners, Sunset Sherborne, and the Netflix billboard operators. I'd like to now move to the concept of stovepipes. Does one part of the city talk to another? The 10th exhibit in your packet, Exhibit J, contains a viewshed analysis, which is quite enlightening. I just bring this up. Was this analysis made available to the Historic Preservation Commission for its prior review? In addition, what has the role of the city's Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission been in the evolution of this new digital billboard? For instance, what were its views on the viewshed analysis? As I listen to the staff report and the folks talking about it, I do want to mention that we are concerned about what's happening with the back of the new digital billboard. I am hearing interesting phrases like the billboard will effectively disappear, there will be architectural camouflage, but we hope that the back of the new digital billboard will not have a deleterious impact on the adjoining neighborhood, especially since the building 8720 to 8726 Shoreham Drive, directly behind it, is an architecturally noteworthy apartment townhouse built back in 1937. A neighbor called us and said they saw the public notice on the building saying that the current 672 square feet static billboard will be increased in size to a 1,080 square foot digital billboard, but the staff report says that it will still remain the new digital billboard at 672 square feet. Which is it? And I understand about the recusals. At the beginning of this section, I saw that Planning Commissioner Buckner recused herself, but I do see that in Exhibit I of the 10 exhibits that I know you all reviewed very carefully, I noticed the radius map, and I can't help but notice that Commissioner John Altschul does live within 500 feet of this property. He hasn't recused himself. I hear there are talks with the city attorney, and I think maybe at some point we should all as a community have a discussion about what is and what isn't a recusal, and what are the rules for that. Otherwise, the WHPA did support the certificate of appropriateness at the HPC meeting. This is a very interesting project, but we would like our concerns addressed during your following deliberations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Victor. Chair, that looks like that's all I have in the queue for public speakers on this item.
Great. So I'll do like I've done on other items and simply say if there's anyone else on the call that wanted to speak to this item, speak now and let us know. So hearing no one, I'm going to turn it back over to the applicant to follow up with their last 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we had heard, I think what we wanted to do, at least initially, is bring Ben Anderson back to respond to, I think it was Commissioner Hoopengarner's last question. So if Ben can come back, and then what I will do is thank the commission and ask Reshma Pendleton to respond and to thank the commission for their consideration. Ben?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Sorry for the delay. Commissioner Hoopengarner, I'm not sure if I didn't address already, but could you clarify if there's an outstanding question that I can help answer?
No, I think you answered my questions fine. Thank you.
Okay.
I mean, in the end, you know, it's the tech. I mean, I live in this world. I know exactly what that involves and how dicey it is. I mean, those of us who can't even get the mute button to work. I mean.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would like to introduce Reshma Pendleton, who represents Netflix, for some comment.
Yes. Hi, this is Reshma Pendleton from Netflix. I wanted to first thank the commissioners and thank everybody, staff and everyone on the call. I think you've heard from our team, we're extremely passionate about this board for many reasons. One, because of the amazing nature of the building. As you know, we have a multitude of boards on Sunset, and this one was the only one that really we felt spoke to us, and we wanted to try and build something and design something as beautiful as this building and do it justice. I think for us at Netflix, the city of West Hollywood is near and dear to our hearts, or we wouldn't have as many billboards on the Sunset Strip as we do, mainly because of the creative storytelling that has been going on the Sunset Strip for many years. And to be part of that, bringing the storytelling and reviving that narrative would mean a lot to us. And hopefully you've had a chance to look at our video. The support for this billboard and for WeHo in general comes from the very highest levels at Netflix. And I hope you feel that with us. And we are looking forward to and hoping that this becomes something that will draw people to the Sunset Strip. Not in a spectacle way, but in a way that people say that the creativity and the storytelling is something that they will visit the Sunset Strip for. And thank you again.
That would conclude our presentation, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, our team is here to respond to any additional questions that you or the commission may have. Finally, I just want to thank you all. This is a very exciting moment for us. We know that we're the first sign out of the gate, And we want to be sure that you and the city are proud of the work that we're doing, working with you in partnership as we move forward towards moving this to the city council and then obviously to construction. We thank you again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your time.
Thank you very much. Ben, if you could please stop sharing your screen so I can see my colleagues. Thank you very much. Commissioner Altschul.
Just to comment on Mr. Omachenko's, or I think it was Mr. Omachenko's comment about my recusal or lack thereof. At the beginning of the meeting, I discussed this matter and gave my reason for not recusing myself, because I came to the conclusion that it would not have an impact on my particular ownership interest in that condominium building, and totally dissected that and had discussed it with the city attorney.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Hoopengarner, please.
Well, I'd like to commend the applicant for a really very creative approach to one of the things that is both our strength and our weakness. And I especially like not looking at the back of the billboard. That I think is a very creative approach. I very much look forward to the technology and how this is possibly going to work. Without getting ahead of my colleagues, I would be very much in favor of moving this forward and would make a motion to that effect.
I'll second.
And I would like to make a couple of tweaks to the resolution. I really appreciate what you're saying about the reflectivity, but I'd like that to be very clearly addressed in the resolution. And I'm not sure legal, Ms. Langer, what kind of magical language you can come up with, but I want to make sure that that's on everybody's agenda and is addressed in the execution of the project. And it doesn't kind of go missing and then all of a sudden people are running off the road because they're getting an eyeball full of a sunrise or a sunset. At Sunset Boulevard is notorious. We just came to, we literally just hit daylight savings time, and that's when it right then, boom, at drive time, it hits everybody in the eyes. So I really want to make sure that we take care of that.
Okay, I'll take a look at the language while the rest of the commission's comments are being provided.
I also do believe that I agree with Mr. Omachenko. This is a wonderful building, and I applaud the applicant for choosing it and for respecting it. But I want to make sure that that stays respected and that the development agreement reflects that when those of us who are sitting around this virtual table are no longer around. So I'm not sure what language we can use that is better than maintain and good, but there is a level of excellence, and I think we've all seen in this city and around examples of what I will call billboard holder buildings, that the building has been allowed to decline precipitously because all of the income is in the billboard that sits on top of it. And I would want to make sure that that intent is contained in our resolutions and the development agreement. With that said, I would be very much in favor of this billboard. I think it's incredibly creative. I love the idea of it floating in the air. I'm especially looking forward to, I think, Ben, you pointed it out, the level of creativity that I think it's going to inspire in the people that are going to put in there. I'm getting verklempt. I think there's a real opportunity for some really great art and in a digital space, which I can't believe I'm actually saying. And with that, those are my comments. Mr. Chair, you're muted. We have the mutual mute challenge.
It's late. Commissioner Jones, please go ahead.
Sure, thank you. I don't have any comments that vary widely from Commissioner Hoopengarner's. Thank you to the applicant for the presentation and your thoughtfulness. I think the design is great. I've been actually I had worked on this policy for a while as part of Planning Commission, and I'm excited to see it come to life. So I also intend to support the item. I also want to thank our public speakers, Mr. Ettman and Mr. Omolchenko, for their comments. Again, like, we really can't make good decisions without your input. So very much appreciate you taking the time to speak, especially at this time in the evening when we still don't know who our president is. Yeah, that's all I have to say other than the comments. Thank you.
And Commissioner Altshull?
Well, I totally agree with what Commissioner Hoopengarner and Jones have said, and the wow factor of this particular billboard is amazing, especially given the comparison to what they're proposing to do and what's there now. And the footprint, or let's say the sky print, is just about equal. So that the FAR, as we say in our industry, is just about the same. I have nothing to add other than the fact that the wow factor is tremendous. The creativity and ingenuity is tremendous. And I think the city should be extremely proud to be the pioneer in going along this route. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to expand on my colleagues. I agree with them. But Commissioner Hoopengarner raised some concerns about the technology. And I raised those concerns as well with the applicant when we met the other day. And, you know, it might not work. But I believe if anyone can execute this, a brand like Netflix will. And I also am of the mindset that somebody's going to do it first. And I want that to be in West Hollywood. And I want it to be with the sort of folks that can really invest and make this and make it work. Because it's in no one's interest to have a big billboard on Sunset Boulevard that's not working. It's a big money suck. So I also love the idea, you know, I'm sitting in my apartment, you know, in a building built in 1927, that we kind of have that in West Hollywood where we have the old right next to the new. And I think this perfectly exemplifies bringing what's great about old Hollywood in this building and putting it with what the future of Hollywood is. And I think this accomplishes it in a way that I don't have the words to properly articulate what I'm trying to say, but I'm seeing some people nodding their heads in agreement. So I'm going to assume that I'm at least getting the idea across that it's bold and I really hope it works. And I think that it probably will, but that it's really exciting that we're going to be taking this step. And so I'm glad to see that we're unanimous in support of this, and I am excited to see. I hope that the council agrees with us on this, and we can move this forward. And thank you for doing something so innovative in our city. So, does our staff have updates on the language to take back to Commissioner Hoopengarner?
Yeah, I have a couple things while we tackle that. And I think most of the answers to all the questions and the things raised by our public speakers is we've had a whole host of experts on this project who have assisted with the creation of the policy, as well as the vetting of projects that have come through with this. So if I could address the brightness and reflectivity, that's something that's handled in the operational standards. We really developed world-class standards to make sure there was not light and glare that would be a driver distraction, and also reflect onto neighboring residential uses. So that's captured, I think Lauren texted me, in condition 3.4. I think we feel pretty confident about that language. It was also evaluated by our CEQA consultant too, to make sure there wasn't impacts to the environment. In terms of the-
I'm sorry, Brian, before you jump ahead, I just want to go through that, because light and glare usually refers in the context of billboards to the light from the lights, not the reflection. And so I just want to make sure that the language addressed the reflection, not just the glare from the lights. Which is, where is this? 3.4, where am I?
So if I may add, what I was going to add in condition 3.4, there's a requirement that a lighting monitoring report is required upon installation and at 3-year intervals thereafter pursuant to the section of the policy. So I was going to add a provision just saying that the lighting monitoring report must confirm that final materials do not create reflection impacts to neighboring properties.
Yeah, and I would say that the monitoring should happen much sooner than 3 years.
So we do have a condition that monitoring happens before they receive their final approval. So staff needs to go out there with a gun that measures these, light gun, it's called a knit gun, to measure the lighting effects. So we make sure that it's compliant with all the operational standards. So that happens before they get their final building permit.
Well, then couldn't we insert a 6-month review and then the regular 3 years? Because simply because the law of unintended consequences, stuff happens. You think you have it designed perfectly, and then, oh golly. And so I would just like to, once it's live, give it some time to breathe and to tweak. And, you know, the good news is you have the technology available to you to use the software to do adjustments to a certain degree, assuming the issue is not the reflective surface itself. So I don't know what my colleagues feel about that, but I just think a shorter term review once it gets started would be beneficial.
I think that's a very good idea.
Does the applicant have any objection to adding that 6-month?
No, we define.
Thank you. Okay, sorry,
So
Brian.
we would add in that, oh, go on.
Go ahead.
I was going to say in that same sentence about the lighting monitoring report, about halfway through the condition, it says is required upon installation with review at 6 months and at 3-year intervals thereafter, pursuant to the section of the policy.
Yeah, that's where I wrote it in.
Okay.
Another expert we had look at this was those in the sign industry, particularly those in the technology realm. And they said this is a really proven thing that they can pull it off. And they're very confident that this team is the one that can do it. So that was the first concern when we saw this proposal over a year ago. And that was addressed really quickly by our team of experts who are on the Design Excellence Committee. As far as the cultural resource language, there is a maintenance plan that's required as part of that condition. And we use the term good, which is from our Cultural Heritage Preservation Ordinance, which says there's a duty to keep in good repair. So the term good, I mean, we could swap that out for excellence. I doubt the applicant would mind, but it just mirrors what's in the Cultural Heritage Preservation Ordinance itself. And then finally, Arts Commission will have a say in terms of this is a canvas for their use, but they don't look at the view sheds itself.
Well, I think the view shed is primarily the same. I mean, the billboard shifted a little bit more perpendicular to the building, and therefore it's a little bit more impactful, but I don't see that myself as significant in light of all of our other billboards.
With those changes, I want to be clear on I agree with Victor, the sentiment behind Victor's comments of keeping the building in good order. And I think that their condition of it now shows that's their intent as well. The condition from what I've seen on the outside. But if good mirrors what's in the ordinance, then I suspect we should probably stick with the word that's legally definable. And I would like staff's recommendation on whether we should do that or not, because I'm not an attorney.
I believe thought went into drafting this condition. The requirement for the rehabilitation and maintenance plan is really where the the details of what they're going to do is going to come in, and that is going to be reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission. So there is more thought and more depth that's going to come from this. This is the very beginning of a long process and a long relationship, and this is the first step with that term. And so I'm confident with the language that both it mirrors the code and with the rehabilitation and maintenance plan. That's where the details will really be formulated.
Great. Commissioner Altschul?
Just a little bit of history to augment this. I've lived where I live now for the last 32 years, and I have never seen that building in anything other than good plus maintenance, as this is defined here, the way we've been defining it.
I would agree. I mean, I live around the corner on the other side of the street, and it's always been one of my favorites in that neighborhood. It really is iconic.
Great. So hearing those changes, Commissioner Hoopengartner, are you comfortable with the motion?
I think I am. If we can, I'll just reiterate that I move staff's recommendation, and with the minor amendments as outlined regarding a 6-month review of the lighting and the reflectivity of the project, and that I would move that we approve this recommendation.
And I seconded.
Great. David, could you please call the roll?
Thank you. Commissioner Hoopengartner,
Aye.
Commissioner Altschul,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Chair Bass,
Yes.
Congratulations.
and the motion passes with 4 ayes and 3 recusals. Motion carries. There is no appeal process. This is a recommendation to City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the commission.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you, everyone.
We are going to move forward with our agenda as the hour is late. Number 12, unfinished business, we have none. Number 13, excluded consent calendar, none. Item number 14, the planning manager's update.
Jennifer, you're on mute.
Now?
There you go.
Okay. Okay, thanks. I'll be super brief. So we have a meeting in 2 weeks on November 19th. We're going to hear the continued item from 923 to 931 Palm that was continued from October 15th. We've got another subdivision similar to the one we had tonight and a zone text amendment that John Kehoe talked about earlier with the density bonus compliance with the state code. December 3rd, we have a meeting as well, and it will be a 14-unit condominium building. Right now, it looks like it's going to be on that agenda, and another zone text amendment regarding hotels in residential zones. We have no meeting on December 19th and no meeting on January 7th. So that will be it for 2020 until January 21st, 2021. And an update quickly, Commissioner Hoopengartner asked about the projects that were approved at staff level after the zone text amendment that changed the threshold for what came to Planning Commission and what was done at the staff level. We are working on an update with that. We should have the numbers and the information by the end of the year, but since we don't have meetings in the second meeting in December or the first meeting in January, we'll have that update for you January 21st, it looks like. And that's all I have unless you have questions for me.
Great, thank
That
you.
will be the day after we inaugurate our new president.
Yes.
I dreamed big, what can I say?
We're all hoping, we're all hoping. Next item, public comment. Do we have anything, any public comment now, David?
We do. We have one public speaker, Victor Omolchenko. *6, Victor. If there's anybody else on the call that would like in, just do *9 to let me know that you're interested. You can go ahead, Victor. Okay, it looks like he's, I'm not getting anything from him. Looks like he may be stuck again in the queue. Victor, go ahead and hang up and call us back. The meeting's not over yet. So if you do that quickly, we'll be able to hear from you.
Thank you.
That's all I have for now.
Let's do subcommittee management while we're waiting for Victor to call back in. Anything from anyone on subcommittee management? I understand long range is canceled next week. Or not long range, design review.
Design reviews canceled.
Design reviews canceled on the 12th. That's correct. Canceled on the 26th. That is Thanksgiving. On December 10th, we've got 1282 Fairfax, which is the Methodist Church right at the corner of Fairfax and Fountain, and 1238 Formosa, which was continued from the October 22nd to make some changes. It was already reviewed and they are coming back.
Great.
And it looks like Long Range Subcommittee has got its own text amendment on November 19th that I mentioned for hotels with rooftop additions, the hotels in residential districts.
Great. Do we have Victor yet?
No, Victor has not called back in yet. Okay.
Then we'll go to commissioner comments. Anything from?
No.
Just one minor thing. The DA, for example, we've talked about it before. When you put watermarks on documents, if the watermark's too heavy, it makes it extremely difficult to read. So I appreciate the need for the watermark, but can we just back it up a little bit?
You got it. That's me. It looks different when you. Yeah.
Hello.
Hold on,
Hello?
Victor. We'll get to you in just a moment.
That's it.
Thank you.
I'm good, and I wish everybody a safe and happy, I guess, Thanksgiving, because we're not going to see each other before then, and hope you get to at least virtually enjoy your friends and family.
We have a meeting in 2 weeks before Thanksgiving.
Do we? Oh, that's right. Okay, so I was thinking design review, so that one's off, but the regular. Okay. Pick a Thursday, any Thursday.
Okay, we're in the middle of commissioner comments, but I see Victor just signed in. So Victor, do you have anything?
Yes, thank you again. And Victor Omolchenko, West Hollywood, citizen, resident. And listening through all these different items, I just wanted to bring up the fact that it's going back to staff, the project on Fairfax Avenue, the R3C-C that you were discussing earlier. I know there was word made that, you know, the neighborhood would become involved. I really think we need to come to grips with this 500-foot notice. I don't live that far from the project, and I just feel that maybe in terms of these kinds of bigger projects, that the announcement should be extended to 1,000 feet. And I really also appreciate Commissioner Jones's provision of all of the background and the history of this, that 7 of you back 3 years ago voted against that. And looking back into the records now, I see that 2 of the 3 council members who actually went against your wishes will no longer be with us. So I don't know what's going that it's interesting how things evolve. So I would like to see more public announcement, more outreach done about this new development. And I know that state law is constantly mentioned, and it's very good to hear about a briefing like about SB 743. And when we hear about now that there's the new state law that's being codified and it's mandatory that all 100% affordable housing projects don't need any parking. That's what I think I heard. I try to get to meetings, but I don't remember us ever saying as a city, as a planning commission, as a city council, oh, please, state, pass this 100% affordable housing law that will thus result in no parking. It makes me wonder why we can't have more input. Instead, we're always kind of being told by the state what to do. We're being told, oh, we have not provided enough housing for our regional housing assessment. Then I hear words like, oh, we we could be liable. But then when you ask, well, what would we be liable for? We never really hear, are they going to keep $50 million from us? Are they going to punish us? Are they going to take us to the gallows? We always seem to bow to the laws in kind of fear, and I'm wondering where we are at the beginning of the process when the laws have not yet been passed in Sacramento. And going forward 2 weeks from now, I know you have a lot of work to do, and I know you continued the hearing on the 923 to 931 North Palm Avenue project. I know there's a lot of material in there. We're hearing from community members. They're getting their act together in that, and we're reviewing. The West Hollywood Preservation Alliance is looking at some more materials, and we'll certainly probably have comments at that November 19th meeting. But what I would just like to leave you with right now is in our review right now, some people called me and are asking, what is all this by right, by right, by right? Well, by right, when you see that in reports and that, when you see that as we understand it, that means they can do it because it's in the code. But should they do it? Must they do it? Where does discretion come in? Just because something is by right, by right, by right, by right, is it really right? And I know that this is going to be an interesting project because it's not just about, now I'm wearing my West Hollywood Preservation Alliance hat. It's not just about historic resources, but it's about environment, it's about traffic, it's about transportation and so forth. So I trust this will be a very interesting meeting 2 weeks from now. And I thank you all for looking out for our city and for remembering its history. Ms. Jones, oh, thank you so much. I kind of forgot about all that stuff. And I think it's very important to both bring history in and also the current world in, like with the digital billboard that you just approved. So I wish you all a good evening, and thanks for listening to me.
Thank you for sticking with us, Victor. We appreciate it.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Altschul.
Tacking on to Victor's comments, something may be referred to as by right, but everything is discretionary.
Okay. Any additional commissioner comments? Okay, with that, I will adjourn our meeting this evening to our next meeting, November 19th, which will be held via teleconference, and wish you all a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, everyone.